On the day he turned 5, a terrified boy crumpled after remembering one nightmare too real. A grim future where a bloodied, defeated white-haired man kneels before a dark-haired swordsman while a group of young women watches in silence. The swordsman's eyes burn with icy resolve as he raises his blade for the final strike, while the condemned man, face smeared with blood and drenched in despair, can only brace for the end. The screen drops with a brutal final snap, and even while he's asleep, the boy's mind lights up like a warning siren. He remembers everything, every detail. He knows this game like it's stitched into his bones, and he can still see the villain getting executed. He jolts awake in his bed, grabs his chest, and in a flash his face turns ghost pale, sweat pouring down as terror crashes in. The game he loved more than anything was a wild fantasy world built for adult hearts, where love clashed with war, following a man chosen to become the strongest swordsman, the Sword Emperor. And right then, he was still living it up at a top-tier academy. The hero's journey was a wild ride of growth. He chased love, trained side by side with his companions, and kept leveling up until he became unstoppable. This road would finally shove him into a showdown, where he'd tear down the evil Duke's family after they'd been secretly plotting a coup to grab power. And to his absolute horror, it clicks. He's not some random bystander. He's Luke Hagato Disgustos, the 5-year-old second son of that very Duke. And now he remembers the one thing the game saddled him with, a brutal nickname. They branded him the Gross Fat Toad, because his ugly look and nasty attitude screamed petty tyrant. He taunted the protagonist and his allies, all while hiding behind his family's authority, and those boys flinched at the very idea, remembering the game had hardcore elements he just couldn't stomach. The game lays out why Luke became a villain. His mother died the moment he was born, his family dumped him into neglect, and his magical gift never got trained because he kept sinking into an inferiority spiral. Desperate to be seen, he started doing terrible things, only for the Duke to grab him, use him like a pawn, and cast him aside, his whole fate reduced to one cold purpose: get killed. He snapped back at the terrifying image of his future self, a monstrous thing he'd become in only 10 years. And the moment he remembered that he and the game's protagonists were supposed to be 15 when the story kicked off, pure dread sank into his young body. A spark of pure determination flared in his chest. If he could stop himself from turning into that monster and dodge the life of villains waiting for him, maybe fate would finally bend. He didn't want to die. And with memories from his past life still burned into his mind, he told himself he didn't even need his family's love. He let himself dream for a second about a calm, happy life, living like a noble without ever worrying about work. But that fantasy got instantly and brutally shut down. No, it wasn't happening. Grim reality slammed down on him. He couldn't rewrite what his family truly was: evil, pure, and simple. So there was no escaping that purged destiny waiting for them. All he could do was claw his way into enough power to defend himself when the day finally arrived. A spark hit him, and he stared at his tiny hands as memory slammed back. This game's lore, said Luke Disgustos, was built to wield magic. As he focused, he could feel a ghostly, soul-deep energy, mana, swirl up around him, getting denser by the second. But right then, reality punched him in the gut. This world didn't come with the game's neat little command UI, so how was he even supposed to cast magic without it? He chose the simplest trick he could think of, like the command was a magic chant, and shut his eyes as he clasped his hands, pouring every ounce of will into the moment before shouting, "Heal." Right away, a gentle glow spilled out from his body. Light faded and he snapped his eyes open, heart pounding. Did the spell really work? No health bar to tell him the truth, but one thing was certain: his body felt noticeably better. Hope surged through him like a spark. Maybe he could actually get better. So he threw himself into the night, practicing non-stop, his voice a soft but stubborn echo in the dark as he repeated the healing spell again and again. His training pressed on until the first dawnlight spilled through the window. When he finally collapsed into bed, exhaustion hit hard. Then the door to his room creaked open, and a voice called, "Luke-sama," asking how he felt and declaring it was time to get up. He jolts awake, foggy and heavy, but the sickness is gone. So he figures he must have passed out after burning through his mana, meaning his reserves are tiny, like he's got only enough for about 10 healing spells. While he brooded over his limits, a mysterious figure slid into his room and stared like he could see every ounce of his sickness. Then the truth hit him hard. Without real study, he'd never truly grasped magic, and he started begging for anyone to teach him. The visitor is Syrup, an exclusive-made, 12-year-old dog-beast man, and since Luke's sure his dad would never sign off on a tutor, he decides to study solo, grabs Syrup, and begs her to read for him. She starts him on a simple picture book, but Luke yanks at a thick, hard-sounding tome called *** Magic Fundamentals, declaring that's exactly what he's going to learn. His heartfelt plea hits her like a razor-sharp arrow. He clasps his hands together and looks up at her, begging with everything he's got. When she catches his real vulnerability, she realizes he's just a kid at heart. So she listens as he tells her she's the only person he can trust. Then he begs her to teach him how to read and do math. Joy floods her, purpose sharpens her smile. She beams, clenches her fist, and vows with unstoppable confidence that he can count on her. Still buzzing with energy, she urges them to jump into physical training too, pointing out how dog beastmen naturally crave it. Only for him, still lying in his bed, to shoot her down without a word of sugarcoating. Later, as Syrup battles her way through that brutal book, Luke can't stop staring. How does she even say those impossibly long words? She trips over every concept, stammers through the difference between attributeless magic and attribute magic, and by the end, Luke is fully convinced. This stuff is brutally complex. It breaks down mana, this clear, floating power in the air, and shows how much punch you get depends on your raw, God-given talent, and then it hits him. That soul-like presence he'd felt. It was mana all along, and boom, his worst suspicion becomes reality. He really does have a gift for magic. He keeps realizing that casting a spell is all about imagination. Picture the effect, then let your mana surge right where it needs to go, and at last it clicks. That's how he's casting his healing spell, because he'd instinctively pictured his own mana flowing into his wounds and stitching them back together. He pushed deeper into his training and learned the core split in magic. There's attributeless magic, the plain kind anyone can use, and then attribute magic, which demands real talent and sits in the hands of most nobles. As his eyes grew heavy and sleep pulled him under, he started weighing his own bloodline, especially the family everyone whispered about, the ones celebrated for their sickening skill in the magical arts. While he dared to hope he'd earn a shot at tribute magic before the law shut him out. After grinding through the night until his body gave out, Syrup spotted him and softly lifted the sleeping guy straight to his bed. She slid him under the covers with care, making sure he stayed nice and warm. For one quiet moment, she kept her eyes on him, her face deep in thought as he slept. Back then, he was already making serious headway, because when he burned through every last drop of mana each day, his total capacity kept swelling. At first, it was brutal. He kept blacking out from the strain over and over. So he dodged the fate of that gross fat toad from the game and taught himself how to read, then dug into studying on his own. Still, he couldn't shake the problem. No magic tutor in sight, and living in the annex with only a handful of servants meant his learning had hit a hard wall. He could still picture Luke from the game, covered in acne, blemishes, warts, cracked skin, and pure weight. The message was loud and clear, that body needed fixing. So he decided right then, first priority, get his health under control. His very first move was pure hygiene. He couldn't believe it when he saw people here barely washed a day in their life, so he whipped up a bunch of bubbles in his hand and scrubbed his face clean. Right then, Syrup slid up and demanded to know why the water was so foamy. So he wiped his face and snapped back that his skin was super delicate and had to be washed gently, while his maid watched him, eyes wide with curious intrigue. She snaps in shock, baffled that he could even have delicate skin, and Luke just shrugs off her worries, cool as ice, teasing her with a cryptic hint that he'll show up again someday, and not the way she'd ever guess. And just like that, they kicked off a fresh skincare routine, washing their faces twice a day. And Syrup, the ever-loyal maid, proudly declared she'd master his methods down to the last detail as part of her duties. His fresh regimen blew up fast. Now it included regular baths, and he'd use that time to drill his magic too, daydreaming about a future where he could buy the best soaps, lotions, and sunscreens without even blinking. As he soaked the syrup, she watched from the veranda, surprised to see just how weirdly intense the washing was, yet secretly relieved he was teaching her. Until he soothed her, promised that with careful practice her skin would turn perfectly smooth, and swore she'd grow up into a real beauty. Syrup saw right away. His look had totally changed. He looked healthier than ever, nothing like the old days when every meal left him in non-stop misery, and he'd have to heal himself with magic just to get through the night. That pain drove a huge decision. He told the staff that from now on, he and Syrup would cook for themselves. The change hit instantly. He tasted his own cooking and felt right, like something finally clicked. He knew it wasn't his digestive system at fault, it was the local food. The moment he started cooking dishes from his old life, his health shot up fast, like night turning into day. Syrup noticed his self-improvement had taken over his days. He stopped sleeping in and instead woke up with the sun, hitting the forest near the annex every day for fresh air and daily light. He even started slotting in light workouts and short walks every day. Syrup practically exploded with joy, cheering that he could finally step outside. When she saw how far he'd come, she pushed for real training, but he shut it down instantly, flat out refusing. He even admitted he genuinely hates exercising, so intense training was a no-go, and it completely caught her off guard. He turned to her and spilled the truth. He just wanted a healthy, laid-back life, no big dreams, no constant struggle, and that simple goal left Syrup stunned for a second, until he gave a calm, unwavering yes. He agrees with Syrup's worry, admitting that an easy, carefree life won't come easy, and then he lays it out. If he just eats and sleeps, he'll turn into something awful in no time, a thought that leaves Syrup completely baffled. She stares at him, and her brain can't stitch together how sweet he looks right now with what she already knows is coming. Because in her head, she's forced to imagine that horrible, toad-faced monster he'll become, the same guy who'll mourn the handsome future he'll never get. Fresh out of the bath, he keeps talking, and drops the bombshell that this kind of life would hand him a mountain of free time. Sierra asks if this is all because of his noble status, then fires back that non-stop leisure stops being fun, because even endless trips to amusement parks or casinos would eventually start to feel dull. Even though he can't say it out loud, he's already reached the truth. He was born into nobility, but he feels there's no safety net for him, and with his father's icy cold way, he's sure the day will come when they either sacrifice him or leave him behind. He remembers the original Luke's path, squandered his privilege, destroyed his own life, and he refuses to repeat that same nightmare, vowing to use every advantage he has to get ready for whatever's coming next. He's dead set on using the advantages of his privileged childhood to dodge the pain waiting ahead. His dream is to marry someone who'll carry him, and if that fails, he's already got Plan B locked in. Grab a reliable income so he can live comfortably on his own. A game-changing decision hits him as he heads for the academy, because he remembers this world's tale runs in two big parts, with Alessida's Royal Academy right at the center, and Luke himself was the heart of that whole academy arc. He reels off the two paths in his head, the war arc, where a villain's feud gets settled, and the academy arc, where bonds are forged and characters truly grow. And he knows mastering both is the only way to lock in his future. That thought rips through him and shows on his face, because he instantly realizes skipping the academy could skyrocket his chances of surviving. But even so, he can't ignore it. Something vital is pulling him there, and he has to go. He pictured the game's characters, and a warm blush shot up his cheeks, because yeah, he loved them. With that fresh purpose blazing in his chest, he stared over the sprawling city and swore to himself. He'd savor this world as Luke, chasing an easy, happy slacker life. His dream of an easy life suddenly became Syrup's favorite topic. She insisted that if he wanted to live healthy and comfortable, he had to learn swordsmanship, not just for fun, but to defend himself. He tried to push back, mumbling that he'd rather move as little as possible, and that's when she pouted hard. Still, he couldn't miss it. Syrup clearly had a soft spot for the sword. Then he basically wondered why he'd need to learn it himself when she could guard him, so when she shot back, stunned, "How did you know I was training in swordsmanship?" He just shrugged and said it was nothing, just a gut feeling. With a grin, he told her to take over all the sword fighting, and she practically couldn't wait as she gladly agreed. When she slipped out of his room for the night, she sent him off with warm wishes. Next morning, he replayed his stubborn refusal to work out, and finally got it. If he wanted to stay healthy, he couldn't dodge movement forever. That's why he'd cooked up a brand new spell. He stepped forward and unveiled his tiny, squishy, gelatinous creation. Just a simple little face staring back at everyone. And this was the raw, attributeless magic he'd invented, a spell he boldly named Asterisk Vow Asterisk Asterisk. The spell's biggest flex was that it still worked even when he was engulfed in slag. To truly understand how Val worked, you had to start with the guts of attributeless magic. This basic power takes raw mana and reshapes it into different forms, split cleanly into 5 big categories. He broke down 2 of these categories that almost anyone could pull off, starting with daily life magic, the kind that lights up rooms or wipes away grime, and then strength magic, where you burn mana to shove your strength or defense higher for a short time. But you pay for it by tanking your endurance, since how well it works depends on how fit your body is. He kept talking and then, boom, the 4th school came into view. Enchantment magic, a power that supercharges weapons with extra attributes, but only smiths and enchanters can actually pull it off, and he even admitted he had zero clue how to use it himself. Then he broke down the last 2 powerhouse schools, support magic first, where you boost and weaken others by coating them in mana, and the strength rides on your imagination, and then restoration magic, where mana is used to precisely nudge the body and force healing. Plus, he casually admitted that from his past life's training, he was already scary good at it. He realized every school of attributeless magic lives off the same heartbeat, turning mana into power, and that exact rule is what he used to forge Val, his own self-sustaining spell. It's so easy to use, he stepped outside, barked one simple command at the mana orb wobbling beside him. "Val, fetch me that water." The gelatinous thing glided straight to the nearest table. A mana construct wrapped the glass like it was obeying a command, hauled it right to him, and click, he drank. He shot out a quick thanks, then dropped his head on the table and said the real test was about to hit, as he completely handed it all over to. While he slept, the spell finally kicked into gear. Val's gelatinous form slid over his resting body, coating him inch by inch. Then his spell kicked in, forcing his body to work for him, grinding his limbs through brutal stretches and twists, contorting him into impossible shapes while he stayed totally out cold. He thought it was the perfect answer. If he could train while unconscious, then all of it would feel like a breeze. A smug grin lit up his face as he stood right next to his masterpiece. He stared in awe as Val moved all on its own. And now he can finally train his body without giving up his laid-back, lazy lifestyle. He sprawled on the couch and still, boom, the one catch to his plan hit him. Even after sleeping through the workout, his body punished him with muscle aches the very next day. He sprawled on the couch, boxed in by towering book stacks, and sure enough, his plan was rolling along. But he could already feel the massive amount of work still waiting for him. His stomach growled like thunder, and a brutal, sudden hunger slammed into him. Because even though it was only afternoon, all that exercise plus his growing body had already started demanding real fuel. Right then, Syrup burst in with a mouth-watering dessert, basically saying, "Yeah, too much restraint is its own punishment." He snatched a spoonful and grinned. This was exactly what he'd been chasing. A lazy, villainous, noble life, simple, sweet, and indulgent. In a fancy library, 11-year-old Luke sprawls on a huge, comfy cushion, totally locked in on his book, while 17-year-old Syrup stands right beside him, watching and waiting. He keeps reading like the world can't touch him. Then Syrup's eyes gleam as she watches him, smirking and whispering his name. Only then does he snap his gaze up from the book and ask what she wants. He considers her, and then a private thought hits him. There's no real difference between magically carrying a glass and magically carrying himself. He decides it'll be a nightmare to explain that to Syrup, given how awful she is at magic. Just as his thoughts settle, Syrup's shocked scream cuts in. She points out that he and his cushion are now floating high above the floor. He dodged her question about how he was floating and flipped it into a dare, join him for a ride. Her shock snapped into wild, wide-eyed excitement as she practically blurted, "Can I?" He grinned and confirmed, of course. She climbs onto the floating cushion, shaking with raw nerves, and he quickly tells her not to worry. He's pouring mana into it to keep it steady. Then she swallows hard and finally buys his explanation. Fear evaporates in an instant, and the moment she drops onto the cushion beside it, pure surprise melts into warm, soothing comfort. She blurts out that nothing has ever felt this comfortable, and Luke shoots back, "I'm so happy to hear that." After tasting his magic for herself, Syrup lifts her hand and asks, "Can I ask one more question?" She stares at him and asks how his body is so perfectly trained, because all she's ever seen him do is read, sleep, or take those calm little walks. No training in sight. He tells her confusion makes total sense. Then he slips into fresh clothes, turns back and agrees to explain, thanking her for asking. He guides her into a more open space and launches into his explanation, starting by bunching his mana, then hardening it, until a bright, swirling orb blooms in his palm. "Watch closely," he says, and the second he finishes the words, he snaps that he's ready to begin. A storm of raw, powerful energy bursts from his body, and as it roars, he realizes, man, his vow has changed over the last 5 years, and so has his understanding of just how much power it holds. He lunged forward with sudden, graceful precision, ripping through a chain of fluid martial arts moves in the courtyard, while Syrup stood frozen in the doorway, watching. His moves turned into a blur of ruthless control, one tight lock, a sharp kick that snapped through the air, and then a crushing punch. Syrup could only gape, eyes wide, as she burst out in awe at how insanely skilled he was. Her amazement flipped into pure confusion, and she blurted, "What's going on?" As she reminded him, again, that he always swore he hated intense exercise. She blurted out his name, stuttering hard, trying to catch up as he finished his routine and locked into a steady, razor-focused stance. He let out a quiet breath, and a faint blush crept over his cheeks from the effort. Syrup sprinted right up to his side, her hands clasped tight with pure excitement as she blurted that his performance was incredible. Then he wheeled toward her and demanded, "What do you think?" She blurted out how shocked she was, confessing she never imagined how brutally hard he'd been training. Then she gushed that his movements looked like a master. Something she'd never seen, not even from veteran martial artists. He just nodded and asked, "Really?" while he drank in every word of her praise. Then he leaned in and spilled the secret behind his power, his brand new spell, asterisk trace asterisk. He said he drinks in Val and shoves it into his body, so the memories can jump straight from his brain to it. He said this spell lets him replay the exact moves of his favorite martial arts masters. So even if he's blanked on the finer details, Val can still pull those memories up and copy them flawlessly. And depending on the source, he might even stitch together combos straight from his favorite fighting games and manga. With one dramatic flourish, he fused every scrap of fighting knowledge, and their storied passed into a single thing, his own unstoppable, one-of-a-kind fighting style. He tells them he doesn't even realize his own moves, so how could he claim he's working hard? Still, this whole method drills his body, builds muscle memory, and makes him stronger, and honestly, it's a super convenient setup. And yeah, his floating spell already blew minds, but now he's cooked up a brand new spell completely from scratch. Stunned by the revelation, Syrup freezes and gapes at him, eyes blazing as she calls him a genius. Then he calmly shuts the idea down. She totally gets his modesty, thinking, so it must be brutal for him to grasp his own talent. Inside, she can't believe it. Her master is only 11, and he's already stared straight into the crushing depth of magic. Luke, though. He's completely gone, and he admits he has no idea what she's talking about. He turns away, wipes the sweat off his face, and asks if she's got a change of clothes ready, because the exhaustion from his workout is hitting hard, and it all feels weirdly natural to him, like his old life's memories are still running the show, even if he can't quite wrap his head around how everything actually works. They burst into a forest clearing where a spring bubbles away like a secret, and as soon as Luke says he's grabbing a quick bath, Syrup shoots back that she's jumping in right beside him. He settles into the water and it hits him. This spring is their most convenient bathing spot. Down by the edge, Syrup stands still, letting the compliments the other maids have been throwing at her lately swirl through her mind, feeding her growing confidence. He watches her like she's a miracle, replaying the beauty routine he handed her 5 years ago, and she's been following every step. Her sword skills have sharpened her too, but lately her charm has jumped to a whole new level. He blurts her name and she answers on the spot. When he gently strokes her head, pride flares in him, because getting to see this tender side of her feels like a loyal dog melting from the smallest praise. Back inside and finally dressed, he gives Syrup a mission: tell his father he wants his magic ability officially measured. She doesn't even blink before agreeing. He sinks into a huge cushion, buzzing with anticipation as the Syrup hurries off to carry out his request. He raises his hand, lost in thought, staring at what magic truly means in this world. Because that inborn magical spark, the tribute magic you're born with, is treated like a power god personally hands down. He can't stop wondering who's going to be the one to decide his attribute. If someone tells him it's fire, he imagines it'll be that simple, and then he can use it. The answer is the Ministry of Magic of Alecidus. This powerhouse runs every attribute spell in the kingdom, a place where the world's greatest sorcerers gather and unleash their magic. As a noble, it's his honor to have someone from that elite crew arrive and lay his attribute on him, while he shrugs off the idea that some folks are born without one, because he's not worried about it at all. He's brimming with confidence because of who he comes from. People even the nobility can't help but recoil from them, thanks to their insanely powerful traits. His father commands sand, his older brother wields iron, his stepmother is pure rock, and his older sister. She's got the rare attribute of seduction. He stared at his family's legacy like it was a ticking clock, wondering what one trait would be his. And with a grin packed full of eager anticipation, he couldn't wait another second. The very next day, his door bursts open out of nowhere, and a voice gasps in disbelief when it catches sight of the big cushion he's sprawled on. A visitor in dark coat and glasses spots a beautiful girl and blurts out a remark. Then Luke freezes, totally lost, and thinks, "Wait, who is this guy and why does he keep calling me a girl?" As embarrassment and confusion crash over him, he can't help replaying his beauty regimen like it's guilty. Syrup strides up to kick things off, because the visitor at the door is none other than Malsa Glico, the chief of the Ministry of Magic's Attribute Bureau. The chief goes dead silent, staring at the kid sprawled on the cushion, then straightens his glasses like he's locking in for what comes next. After a quick scan of the scene, he finally snapped into action, speaking straight to the kid in front of him and calling her young lady. He praises the servant's razor-sharp memory, stunned that after hearing his full title just once, she nails it perfectly. Then he quietly thinks that kind of diligence is exactly what you'd expect from a servant in the esteemed household, because nobody in this family can afford a single mistake. After tossing out his praise, he leans in and demands where the young master of the Disgusto's family is. Then Syrup says it's only natural, and that answer throws him into a spiral as he stares past her into the room, his mind drifting. From a seat on the couch, Luke can't stop wondering if the official really just praised the maid for her work. Syrup spots the confusion on his face, snaps out an apology for her rude attitude, then steps up and introduces the kid, Luke Hugelo Disgustos. The intro slows down for Malsa to catch his breath, because he'd already predicted the Syrup. Yeah, the beast man would get judged, all thanks to the state church's doctrine of civil man supremacy, where every non-human race, demi-human, beast man, spirit, and even demons gets ranked under their cold rules. Luke pops up from his seat and strides right up to the official, calling him Malson like they're old friends, until the man snaps back with his full name, Malsaglico, and Luke just grins, insisting he's sure the official isn't a bad person. Then he shoots out a hand and says, "All right, call me Luke, nice meeting you." The official stared at the young boy, and when the kid smiled and spoke so directly, his tough face cracked into a surprised, softer look. He grabs the handshake and snaps back with one of his own. With the hellos finally done, Malsa smirked and said it was time to test Luke's magic attribute. Then ordered the kid to shut his eyes from afar while Syrup watched and felt Luke's quiet breath, wondering if nerves were creeping in. He raises a slender, shimmering instrument, its tip lighting up, then announces that the procedure is about to begin. He finishes the test and the results slam into Luke's mind. 2 words thunder back at him: sleep and slaughter. The second Malsa said those words out loud, something inside him snapped, and he changed for good. It felt like power clicked into place inside him, not like something brand new arrived, but like a truth he'd always carried finally hit him all at once, and the realization was downright mind-blowing. He told Malsa that the moment he heard the names of his attributes, he somehow just knew what magic he could wield, and Malsa, seeing how deep his insight went, jumped in and offered to explain more. He kicked things off by saying some crazy, one-of-a-kind traits get labeled as rare magic, and then he flat-out confirmed that both sleep and sloth are part of that special category. He kept talking, saying most traits were out in the open, but rare magic was always locked behind secrecy. Then he pitched a safer cover story, just label Luke's skills as magic that tweaks the human body, and Luke agreed without a second thought. The boy spoke up with a worried question. "All I can think of is using my new power in simple ways. Is there something else?" And Malsa replied, "Every mage has spells they naturally fit, but real growth comes when you dig into your own strengths." He jabbed the air with a raised finger and insisted that the only real mastery is finding magic that fits you. Luke just stayed quiet, chewing on the advice in his mind. Then he swore he'd remember every bit of that guidance as he kicked off his training, and even that promise caught him by surprise, leaving him stunned for a second. Luke casually dropped that he didn't even know appraisal magic existed, and that twist instantly flipped Malsa's surprise into pure shock. She stared, stunned, and demanded to know how on earth he could know something like that. Luke calmly lays out his logic, saying that as a reincarnator, he just put the pieces together, even if he knew it was supposed to stay secret. Then he turns to Malsa and presses her hard. "If my knowledge wasn't obvious, why did you appraise my attributes just now?" His blunt honesty throws Malsa into a full panic. Words snag in his throat as he stammers, so he blurts, "Syrup, get tea for our guest now," and the beastman instantly snaps to it. Moments later, once the tea hits the table, Malsa takes a slow, thoughtful sip, shuts his eyes, and savors every drop, then grins and declares, "Delicious." He asks what the tea's called, and Luke tells him it's a special herbal blend he personally grows. No one can buy it anywhere, and then Luke pushes it as a must-try. Malson adds that it clears the fog from his mind. Malsa flashes a grateful smile at the boy, and Luke jumps in, offering him some of the tea leaves, then swears he'll keep the appraisal magic secret. The talk suddenly goes way more personal. Malsa says he's certain his own daughter would love the tea, and Luke blurts out that he's shocked, because he's just realizing Malsa even has a daughter. Malsa then adds that she's about Luke's age and is crazy about. The moment magic gets mentioned, Malsa's pro-instincts snap back to life. He leans in like a hunter, fires off questions about that flying cushion Luke used earlier, and insists there's no way it's just some run-of-the-mill spell. Luke just grins through the whole outburst and tells him, "It's fine." Then Malsa snaps back, realizes he went too far, and blurts out a quick apology. With the tension finally calming, Luke points at the floating cushion and signals Malsa to step in and talk about it for real. As soon as their talk ends, Malsa rises to go, thanking Luke for his time. When he turns, Luke suddenly calls out Malson like they're close, then drops his serious face and asks if Malsa would be willing to become his tutor. Malsa gets totally blindsided by his sudden demand. He clamps a hand over Luke's mouth and blurts out, stunned, "Wait, I don't think you need a tutor." Then he presses him, demanding to know exactly what Luke thinks he can learn from him. He makes it crystal clear. His request is easy. He just wants Malsa to reply to every letter he sends, quizzing him about magic he can't wrap his head around because, yeah, he's proposing they become pen pals. Malsa lets a faint, thoughtful smile creep onto his face as he murmurs, "Honestly, that idea's got my attention." Luke's face lights up with hope as he blurts, "So that means Malsa accepts me." Malsa grins back and asks if Luke can ask her questions every now and then too. Malsa quickly nods and says he's totally fine with it, but he admits, quietly, that he can't promise he'll answer every single question. Luke hears that and immediately lights up, declaring, "Deal." Luke and Malsa beam at each other as everything falls into place. Then Luke throws out his thanks, and Malsa grins that she'd love to write with him. And boom, right from there, their letters took off. With the tutor locked in, Luke's magic knowledge shot up through every message he traded with Malsa. Now he's lounging back, letter in hand, and you can see it. Understanding hits him like a wave across his face. After these lessons, it finally clicked. Real magic wasn't some shapeless free-for-all. The kind with no source could be molded by pure imagination, but spell magic with a tag had to obey hard rules. And then he understood the missing piece. His appraisal magic wasn't just a trick, it was the key that unlocked how his own inherent magic worked. This inherent magic is basically the starter kit for any attribute, like fire. You begin with pilot light to spark a tiny flame, fireball to turn mana solid, and fire arrow to hurl it like a projectile. After that, real power is built on what you learn and how hard you practice. He weighs what he can really do, and then spots something huge. His sleep power comes with 3 built-in spells. The first just knocks a target out, but you can fine-tune how hard it hits, since the strength scales with how much mana he pours in and how well the target can resist. He kept reading, digging into the other 2 sleep attribute spells. One called Sleep Timer let him set by touch exactly how long the victim would stay asleep, totally unawakenable no matter what. And the third, Sleep Delete, gave him a way to force a sleep spell to vanish on command. The weight of those abilities finally hit him. If he fused his sloth attribute into the mix, his targets wouldn't even get a clue before it all went wrong. Sure, magic might be blocked with resistance and defensive spells, but he could knock people out with sleep before they fully registered the danger, slipping right past their defenses like they weren't there. His thoughts thundered with wild possibilities. Like if a fire arrow spell existed, wouldn't it be insane to have a sleep arrow too, so he could put enemies down from a distance? A confident grin snapped onto his face as the realization hit. Both of his abilities were so powerful they felt like. He even toyed with the idea of slipping a teacher into a sleep spell just so he could ditch class anytime he wanted. And when he stared at the letters and books piled on his desk, a rush of excitement hit him hard, because the spells were endless, and no amount of time could ever be enough to test them all. Ever since those days, Luke has slipped into a wild new routine. Every single morning, he seizes control of his own body to drill physical training. And by the time it's over, his mind is crystal clear, letting him lock in hard on his magical experiments later. Finishes, Syrup the Beast Man strides up and asks if her master wants dinner, and Luke immediately perks up, grinning as he tells her to make him one. Flex on their arrangement. Every bit of that syrup is perfect for any job that gets handed over, and even now he still takes his turn cooking, whipping up dishes straight from the memories of his past life. Meals might taste fine, but they mess up the one thing that matters. They ignore every detail, and the final plate comes out mushy and ugly instead of appetizing. After deciding to let her cook this time, he wipes the sweat off from his training while he waits, only to feel his worries pile up year after year. Still, at just 11 years old, he shoves those thoughts aside for later. He darts to the nearest water source, a hidden little pool, then freezes mid-wash because faint voices drift from somewhere close by. A young girl's voice shakes in terror. She's sure death is seconds away, and she's alone. Then, from the edge of the clearing, Luke spots her and realizes this empty place is actually occupied. It cuts the tension for a moment. This place is that dangerous, she's probably just a lost kid. He shouts after her, demanding to know who she is. Hearing Luke's voice, the girl jolts and blurts out a startled cry. Luke shoves through the foliage and confirms, "Yeah, people are definitely here." She jerks her head up and spots him, shirtless, towel draped over his shoulder, and her cheeks instantly light up red as she clamps a hand over her mouth, utterly stunned by the sudden run-in. Stammering like crazy, she doused her face with her hands, utterly flustered. Then Luke, shirtless nearby, suddenly clicks. She must be here for one of his sister's tea parties, and the worst part, he'd totally forgotten it was happening today. He scrambles to calm her down, then introduces himself like it's a big deal. Luke Hugelo Disgustos, and the girl's eyes snap wide as recognition hits. She realizes he's gotta be Iris's younger brother. With zero warning, she puts on this super formal show. She bows low, introduces herself as Karen C. Caribbean, the daughter of Count Caribbean, and Luke just can't help it. Her dead serious earnestness hits him as weirdly hilarious. He drops to her level, his face turning gentle as he asks if she can use attribute magic, and Karen looks up, her worries flipping into wide-eyed shock. She didn't ask permission to show him her magic. She just explained he clearly had a soft spot for it. Blushing hard but itching to prove it, Karen eagerly said yes. She blurts out that she'll do it right now, and as Luke spots her outfit, he can't help asking if she works at some kind of store or the like. She brushes off his question, slips a small ornate pouch from a hidden pocket in her dress, and with a gentle pop, boom, out spills a whole set of cooking tools and ingredients from her bag, and she can't help but grin at how her magic works, even bragging that pouches like this can be bought anywhere. With his eyes glued to her, he leans in, stunned to discover her attribute magic is basically a storage pouch packed with a ridiculous amount of stuff. Still shirtless, he blurts out that he's dying to watch it, then quickly asks if she can put on some clothes first. Before anyone even asks for more proof, she snaps into cooking, summoned ingredients landing instantly as sizzling fills the quiet, clearish air. A short time later, she slid a steaming bowl of spiced moon rabbit soup in front of him, said she whipped it up with whatever she had, and urged him to dig in. He lifted the spoon to his lips, grinning like he just had to find out why tribute magic food tasted so wildly different, and even the smell alone hit like heaven. The first bite jolted him so hard his mind went blank. He blurted that it was insanely delicious, the best thing he'd ever tasted, even back in his past life. While Karen's face lit up with joy, he just stood there, stunned and totally baffled by the flavor that hit him like a wave. Power surged through him, and he realized the dish had slapped a beneficial buff onto his body. Then he looked down. The bowl was already empty. The truth hit hard. Karen wasn't just some noble. She was a young prodigy who cooked meals that boosted your abilities. His eyes locked on Karen with a sharper heat. No way was he letting her slip away. She was the perfect weapon to fuel the lazy life he'd been dreaming about, and he shouted her name to snatch her attention right now. He leaned in and asked, dead serious, if she'd cook him that soup every single day once they grew up, and Karen's face went blank as she just stared, utterly stunned and confused. With a bright, earnest look on his face, he blurted out that she should marry him, then promised he'd gladly join her family just to make it happen. She flushed and turned bright red the second the proposal hit. Luke's reasoning was dead simple. He wanted her incredibly tasty cooking, and even more, he was sure she'd back him when the disgusting family finally crumbled. That day blew her mind. Karen couldn't even think straight because the truth hit her like a thunderclap. He had just proposed to her. Later on, Luke looks back and realizes he wasted zero time. He called his father right away and made the offer official. His dad, totally uninterested like always, just shrugged and told him to do whatever he wanted. Things moved fast from there. The family set up a meeting. And when Luke, Karen, and Syrup finally show up at the restaurant, a giant, cheerful man barrels in and greets them like old friends, then proudly introduces himself. Count Caribbean. The Count beams and ushers them to sit down, while Luke mumbles an apology about his father not showing up, only for the Count to wave it away and say, "Don't worry, your Duke already stopped by, nodded hello, and left." Luke might not say it out loud, but inside, he's horrified that the head of a noble house wouldn't even turn up to his son's marriage meeting. He watched Karen blurt out, "Was your dad's terrifying reputation too much for me?" And deep inside, a wave of relief hit, because the truth was he didn't miss his father one bit. With his focus locked on Count Caribbean, he dropped the formalities and went straight for the point, saying, as the second son, he could step forward and asking outright if he could marry into the Caribbean family. A wild, toothy grin snapped onto the Count's face. He bellowed with pure excitement that the Caribbean family would welcome Luke with open arms. Luke's excited yes sent Karen's heart racing as she stammered, "Are you really okay with someone like me?" But before he could even answer, her father cut in, shouting that Karen had already told him how deeply she loved Luke, and Karen instantly shrank into pure, mortified embarrassment. He nodded at her father's words, but the moment he did, his face turned stone serious. He confessed he'd been worried all along, because he knew the girls had been picking on Karen's looks, even though he was the first one to blurt out his feelings. His mind snapped straight to a memory of his sister Iris, back when she was just 12. How mercilessly she'd mocked every girl she didn't think was beautiful. And the moment he pieced it together, a grimace hit his face because she was exactly the one the Count meant. Privately, Luke clocked that Karen was a bit chubby, but she was still growing. And yeah, she was genuinely cute. He told himself her cooking and her position were the big reasons, yet he was convinced she was a truly good person. The Count, reading his thoughts wrong, gushed about how grateful he was that Luke could see Karen's inner beauty, and Luke didn't even bother to correct him. Right after that, the Count shifted gears and laid out his family's roots, fishermen and traders who ran one thriving ship after another. He said every last one of them, even him, was out at sea again and again. Then he snapped his gaze to Luke and asked if Luke's delicate little constitution could really stand the blazing sun. Before he could even reply, Karen buted in and laid it out. Since she's got no brothers, he'd inherit the house. Then she grinned and promised that if a younger brother were ever born, she'd step aside without hesitation and put her cooking skills to work, opening a restaurant just for him. The moment the thought hit him, he flushed and turned to the Count's worry, swearing that his training makes him sturdier than he looks, and that when it comes to the sun, he's got the ultimate shield ready. SPF 50 sunscreen in a bottle. He weighed what life on the sea would really demand, and breathed easy because he wouldn't get seasick. Plus, he could summon Val to haul the luggage so he could just crash and sleep. With that plan locked in, he finally decided to leave his new father-in-law's company. Right as they got ready to leave, Count Caribbean handed his daughter to Luke with a formal nod, urging the two of them to savor every moment together. Then Luke stepped up, calling him father-in-law with respect and thanking him for everything. Then he counted them off, waved like it was nothing, let out a booming laugh, and teased Luke for being so damn hasty. The moment they were finally alone, Karen snapped her gaze onto Luke with wide, fearless eyes. Then she called his name, yanked his attention in, and blurted out with shockingly fierce certainty that she wanted to be so pretty she could stand beside him. He stayed cool and said he'd overheard that ever since she was little she'd been worried about how she looked. Then he admitted he already thought she was pretty cute, but Karen snapped back fast. That wasn't what she meant at all. She told him that her sister, Iris, always made her feel like her appearance didn't matter, like Iris was watching her every move. And that's why she begged Luke for help. She wanted to grow beautiful. Luke agreed, but warned her he was a ruthless teacher, and Karen shot back that she was ready to learn the. With a smug grin, he told her she really could become beautiful, and then dropped the bomb. There was an easy way. Karen stared at him, stunned, like, "Are you serious? Could someone like me actually pull it off?" He flashed on the idea of whipping out his sleep magic and making her diet a breeze, then realized that slimming down wasn't what she really craved. Karen stayed stuck, staring in confusion as she kept mumbling his easy words over and over. He realized this was the wrong moment for that lesson, so he told them to head somewhere else, right then and there. While Karen jumped in and asked him to call her Karen, and she'd call him Luke, and he agreed without hesitation. All right, he decided, there would be no more small talk out here. He swung toward Syrup, who had just popped up at his side, and told her to lock this down, make sure nobody's watching. The maid nodded and obeyed without a second thought. He kicked things off by saying his diet method runs on magic, and Karen snapped back in shock, asking why magic was even involved. He tried to brush it off like he might be overreacting, but once he heard about her older sister, he couldn't waste time and went straight to the point. He broke it down in plain terms. It's a way to work on your body while you're asleep, and Karen just couldn't wrap her head around it, so he promised to walk her through every detail step by step. Then he admitted his whole deal was sleep and sloth, and Karen's eyes went wide as she blurted out that she couldn't believe he had that too. Without hesitation, she jumped in and agreed to use his sleep trait for her diet. He said the whole thing was crazy simple. He'd use his sleep and a tribute to lull her, and then Val, the thing he calls a shapeless bit of magic, would slip into her body and make a series of movements with it, while Karen stared at the amorphous creature and couldn't help thinking it was kind of cute. Heron nailed it. Val wasn't just any spell, she was self-sufficient magic. Grinning, he affirmed her guess and said he'd start by trying the whole process on himself first. Then he set a 1-minute sleep timer and ordered Val to do a quick, light workout so Karen could watch. A minute later, he snapped awake, and Karen froze, hands clamped over her mouth in pure disbelief. She blurted that it was incredible, and he moved with the calm, razor-precise grace of a martial artist. He wiped the sweat off his brow, stunned that he couldn't remember a single thing from the workout, and told Karen, "Just let Val in, he'll find his way through your body," while she stared back with a shaky blend of hope and doubt, asking if she could really do it too. Right when Karen started changing clothes, Syrup leaned in and asked if she could even handle exercising. Karen blushed and admitted she was awful at it, but Syrup didn't back down, and she still jumped at the chance to try the method. After Luke suggested they start with a light workout to get her body used to it, Karen nodded and agreed, then flexed her bicep and proclaimed she was super strong. But as she moved, Luke caught the contradiction like a red flag. Strength was there, yet her coordination for exercise was nowhere. That light workout crushed her. She sprawled on the couch, soaked in sweat, barely breathing, while Luke hovered over her, demanding to know how she felt, and she could only manage to ask whether what she just survived could honestly count as exercise. She groans in full agony, every muscle screaming after the strain. Luke steadies her and tells her they're starting with basic exercises to rebuild her stamina. Then he offers healing magic, warning her bluntly that some of that muscle pain will still linger. He pushes her to keep going, and even with exhaustion crashing over her, Karen steels herself and promises she'll do her best. Once Luke finishes the exercises, he flips the switch to Phase 2, beauty time. He grabs a big ball of foam, shows her how to spread the lather thick, and warns her not to scrub it hard because the foam will suck up the dirt instead. Karen nods, eyes locked in, clutching a smaller bar of soap. She follows his orders, softly scrubbing her face until the lather turns rich and creamy. Then he tells her to rinse it all away, warning her to go easy and never press down when her hands meet her skin. The lesson moves on and it all gets made up. Karen locks eyes on the lineup of bottles and cosmetics, totally awestruck, and Luke watches her soak it all in, her curiosity blazing, her learning fast, and her excitement immediately paying off. Then they jump into nutrition. Luke says you can't forge a beautiful body without the right fuel, and it hits Karen like a spark. She suddenly sees that with her cooking talent, she can whip up mouth-watering meals that fit any diet, as long as she uses the right ingredients. From that moment on, she dives headfirst into inventing brand-new diet dishes, starting simple with soybean plates and steamed chicken salad. Her passion explodes into a giant feast that stretches across the table, and Luke practically beams as he digs into Japanese goodies like miso soup and natto hamburgers in this strange new world, until he smiles and gently scolds her for cooking way too much. She admits overeating is unhealthy no matter what's on the plate, but she can't stand the idea of tossing it out. She'd been dying to try all those recipes. Then he hears that and instantly goes, "Let's donate the extra to one of the orphanages nearby." Her eyes light up at the thought, and the answer hits her like lightning. This is it. She can keep grinding on her culinary research, and anything they can't finish gets handed straight to an orphanage. She dove headfirst into her brand new routine, whipping up even bigger batches of dishes and personally delivering them to different orphanages every single day. And with a soft, satisfied sigh, she thought it was the perfect setup for everyone. As they rattled along in that carriage again, Luke leaned over and asked if she was leaving once more. She laughed back that it was his plan, and even though he grumbled, he had to admit he'd rather be home, kicking back and relaxing. When they finally showed up, you could see why he hesitated. Once he stepped inside, he recoiled at the grime and the crawling vermin, and he grumbled that the orphanages were so filthy he simply couldn't stomach it. The building's condition was only half the trouble. Kids burst out and swarmed Karen on the spot, yelling her name with pure joy, and with so many orphans unable to use magic to clean themselves, even a crushing cleaning spell could only buy them a little time. In the middle of the chaos, a young girl shoved her way through, begging that her little brother had collapsed and wouldn't wake up. Then she blurted that her hands couldn't summon healing magic, and that the orphanage wasn't truly helped by the church at all, because the priests only showed up to snatch their money. The girl's tale hit Karen like a punch. She froze at the sight of that raw distress, while Luke gently cupped her cheek, murmuring that she was okay and that he'd go check on the boy, then added in a low voice that he really couldn't stand the church in his town. He guided everyone into a small, grim room, and there, a young boy lay in bed, breathing in thin, painful pulls like every breath hurt. It looked a lot like pneumonia, and that filthy, squalid place felt totally hopeless for someone trying to recover. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees by the bed, hands hovering over the sick child, eyes locked on his breath, trying to force it to steady. Then he bellowed one word of magic: heals. Leo's gentle glow washed over the boy, and just moments later his sister burst into relief, thanking Luke over and over. But her smile flipped fast into worry when she demanded to know what it would cost. Luke's answer was chilling in its simplicity: nothing. He calmly told them, "I'm a duke's son, I don't need a single coin," then grinned and admitted he'd only seized the chance to sharpen his magic. He clocked Karen's shaky, flustered face as she asked if he really didn't need a single penny, and he immediately reassured her, telling her that he was the one who should be thanking her, because now he finally understood how to cure that exact illness. As Karen bowed deep and stammered out her thanks, he stared, silently impressed by how sharp she was, thinking her life would run way easier in a better place. Then he snapped back to business, called for the syrup, and his beast man sent a peer forward to take orders. Obeying her master's orders, Syrup rushed into the orphanage director's office, and with a bright, knowing grin, she pitched a simple plan. The Duke's loaded, so why not use some of that wealth for them? In the main room, Luke slammed a heavy pouch into Karen's hands, 50 gold coins just like that, and told her it was enough to scrub the orphanage clean and kick off the kids' education. He admitted it was a pain to deal with, then shut the door on any refusal. Karen paused for a breath, swallowed her nerves, and accepted, calling him young Master Disgustos. A sly, calculating grin cracked across his face, and he couldn't help admitting to himself that, yeah, he'd only tagged along at first, but this was suddenly getting way more interesting. The orphanage was basically a goldmine for his healing magic. Every kind of problem to try on, from poisons and illnesses to wounds, and even the brutal injuries monsters left behind. 14-year-old Luke looked at his life and sighed, because for the last 3 years since he got engaged to Karen, everything's been weirdly calm. Syrup handled most of his needs, Karen brought him his meals every single day, and he kept using Val to stay healthy and sharp. Best part, his lazy little dream was getting even better. Thanks to Karen, he soaked up so many wild experiences. But right then, a heavy melancholy crashes down when he realizes these peaceful days are about to run out. Karen's about to start at the academy this spring and move into the dorms, so he decides he's going to cram every last second they have left together into one final rush. He flicks his eyes to the door and realizes she's still not here. Then the sickening truth hits. She's late, and he thinks he knows exactly why, so he grabs his resolve and decides he'll have to go find her himself. He hustles to the main house, then stops dead, stunned by a weird sight. Testa Hugolo Disgustos, 19 years old, is already there at this hour. Past Testa, who blanks him completely, Luke clocks it fast. Even with him towering over the older man now, Testa doesn't give a single damn. He snaps out of it, dodges the whole cold encounter, and locks back onto his first mission, Karen. He's sure he knows exactly where she is. His search finally drags him outside, and there she is, gliding through a sea of flowers, sitting so graceful it almost stops his heart, like the moment he's been hunting for just appeared. He pauses just to stare, because her transformation is unreal. Her diet worked like a miracle, and now everyone's calling her a true beauty, praising not only how she looks, but also the fresh femininity she finally carries. He strides up to the table, and then, bam, he's thrown back by what he sees. Karen isn't alone. She's sipping tea with Iris, and the second Iris looks up, she blurts, "Oh my, Luke," with pure shock. He finally found his voice, blurting out that maybe he could borrow Karen. But Iris Hugo Disgustos cut him off with a cool, sharp smile and asked what he was doing there. She accused him of trying to ruin her tea party and said Karen came to visit her, not the other way around. Response, he declared it straight to her. He was here to snatch back his kidnapped fiancée, and the moment those words landed, Iris' smile died and her face turned stone cold. Her stare was razor sharp, the kind of reputation that speaks without words, and once a man locks eyes with her, it's basically guaranteed he'll want to be her toy. Her power hit him, and nothing, absolutely zero. Karen snapped into a hurried apology, saying she just wanted to talk to Iris too, and he couldn't help noticing, from where he stood, Karen was way more captivating. He reassured Karen, swore it wasn't her fault, then snapped his focus back to Iris, calling her Neeson, and asked if she'd had enough fun. They told him to trust them alone, and promised that once they were both at the academy, he could talk with Karen as much as he wanted. So he pushed back hard, saying it wasn't fair since he wouldn't be there until next year, and this was his only shot. Heat surged between them, and Karen's face lit up as she froze, thinking how amazing it felt to have two gorgeous people brawling for her attention, while Iris caught her adorable reaction and shrugged off Luke's bratty sulking as nothing more than stubborn attitude. He dipped his head, admitting there was no other option, then snapped at Iris that her terrifying expression was wrecking her beautiful face. With a smile that disarmed her completely, he reminded her she'd be heading to the academy soon and urged her to go all in and give it her best. With the tension finally smoothed over, he grabbed Karen's hand and announced they were leaving. Because if he barely ever saw Iris, then this was the perfect chance to score some points. As they walked out, Karen blurted a rushed apology, catching a shocked Iris completely off guard. He froze, completely hooked by Iris's razor-sharp stare, and when she said he was the only man whose beauty could match hers, her breathy whisper crashed into him. Luke's breath caught, his cheeks blazing as he choked out her name. But that was just a leftover memory, an echo from months ago. Now Karen was gone to the academy, and Luke shut himself away. He sprawled in bed when Syrup's voice cut in and asked what book he wanted for the day. He had other plans, and he dropped the bomb. We're going out today. Making Syrup and everyone stare since this was wildly unlike him, Luke meanwhile thought, I never get a reason to leave. Syrup does the shopping, merchants come to him, and the only person I ever visit is Al. She popped up in surprise again, then practically begged to go with him, no matter what the weather threw at them, and he just smiled and said, as you wish. Before he knew it, they were rolling down the road, Syrup expertly driving the ducal carriage, her beastman features hiding under a dark cloak, while the ride pulled Luke straight into memories of Karen taking them on trips like this, until his heart sank into the moment the carriage jerked to a stop, and they'd finally arrived. He pointed out how lightning fast they were moving, and Syrup said the ducal carriage never gets slowed down. That's just what its power can do. As Luke stepped onto the street, he weighed why he was even here, trying to figure out what this rare trip was really going to uncover. They headed for the giant, multi-story Great Motto shop, this massive department store straight out of the game, where you could grab anything from everyday gear and equipment to gifts meant to win over that special someone. They slipped inside as the welcome rolled in, and Luke whipped around to his companion with a grin, buy whatever you want. Syrup. She snapped back a grateful thank you, all warmth and relief. They were met at once by a sharp, well-dressed man who clocked Luke instantly. You're Duke Disgusto's young son, right? He said, sweeping in with a smile as Morsky Meadow, the man running the place. Luke kept it to himself, but he couldn't miss the truth. For a merchant, information really was the deadliest weapon. Then the owner swept them into an ultra-luxury private room and told them, sit down, pointing at the plush VIP chairs like it was all theirs. He sits in the private room when Morsky Motto slides in, admits it could feel boring dealing with an old man, then offers to introduce his daughter, while a service card waits right beside them, ready the moment they make their request. Right after his father's introduction, a bright young woman strides up, Akari Mado, Morsky's 14-year-old daughter, and Luke instantly clocks her as a major game character, one of the main romance options on the merchant route. Akari beams at Luke and Syrup, tells them she's hoping they'll all get along, and lights up at the fact that Luke isn't rude to Syrup, the beast man. Then Luke and Syrup step in and introduce themselves properly. She snaps into business mode and asks what he wants today, and in Luke's mind it feels like pure luck. He'd been hoping to catch her before the academy, but he never in a million years expected her to show up herself to see him. He asks her to spill her recommendations, maybe a beauty routine or whatever she thinks fits. So Akari lights up, claps her hands, and can't wait to show him everything she's got. Right on cue, she kicks off her presentation with a bright grin and sharp, witty commentary, then unveils her first item, a magic hairdryer. After snagging almost everything Akari laid out, Luke practically glows with joy over his haul, then pivots to Syrup, who's been standing there quietly, and asks if she wants anything for herself. Yet Syrup just blinks in surprise, mumbling that no, she doesn't really. She leans in and tells him straight up. Since they almost never shop together, she'd be thrilled with whatever he picks and hands her as a gift. Akari hears it, steps right up, and shoves a tiny box into Syrup's hands. Inside is a gorgeous red choker. Syrup's eyes blow wide, and she gasps in pure awe, absolutely thrilled by how wonderful it is. Even though she loves the gift, embarrassment hits her hard. She blurts to Luke that she's just a servant and can't accept it. Luke brushes it off and, without a shred of panic, tells Akari they're buying it. He spins around and shoves the box towards Syrup, saying it's his way of thanking her for always taking care of him. And then he carefully asks if he messed up and misread whether she likes him. Her hesitation melts into a resigned, knowing smile, like she already accepts it. Guess there's no help for it, she decides. He carefully snaps the red choker around her neck, then slides his hand up to cover her eyes as he leans in and demands her opinion. With her eyes locked on her reflection, Akari Mado blurts out how perfectly it fits her, and Syrup, pink in the cheeks, can only nod along, shocked at how amazing it truly is. She trails her fingers over the new accessory, blush rushing to her cheeks as she blurts, "So, how do I look?" And when she catches her reflection, she realizes that choker somehow makes her gorgeous white hair pop even more. He watches her with a soft, satisfied grin, totally relieved she loves the gift he picked for her. With shopping finally wrapped up, Akari Mado walked them out to their carriage, savoring the trip as a job well done, then smiling and hoping they'll come back for more. As the carriage lurches forward, he leans back and thinks to himself, maybe doing something like this every once in a while isn't such a bad idea. The carriage rattles through the city streets, and he can't ignore it. Next year he'll be ripped from home and sent to the academy, so he decides he has to taste the world first. Back in his room, he vowed, I'm settling this before I even step out, because he had to uncover why the original Luke turned into that disgusting, fat toad. Lying there in bed, he admits he's already got a solid guess. Sure, it's a hassle. But he can't dodge it, not now. He calls the easy way a brutal road. A brutal standoff defines Luke's life. One side, a swollen, ruined face stamped on him now, and the other, the sharp, healthy young man he used to be. And that terrifying difference keeps gnawing at his confidence every single day. He stares at his reflection, lost in why everything ended up like this, and it's brutal to match the wreck he is now with the sharp, well-put-together boy he used to be. His thoughts spiraled into every possible cause. He'd even hunted for the reason in allergies or a weak constitution. Yet nothing ever clicked, and the answer stayed maddeningly out of reach because the ingredients were always the same. So he started to wonder, was this wild transformation really nothing more than a simple, indulgent lifestyle? He ponders every bite, food, ingredients, the whole game plan, until a wild thought hits. Maybe Karen knows more about this than he does. She reviews Karen's handwritten testimony, nervous hands shaking as she scribbles her final conclusion. Because the properties she describes are basically dead giveaways for toxins. And when he reads her words, it's clear these substances can be used medicinally. But the wrong method can turn them lethal in an instant. A real possibility clicks into place in his head. What if it's poison? And suddenly everything about that messed up change in his appearance makes sense, like the answer is finally within reach. She breaks down into syrup for her testimony and asks what he was like as a kid. She says that until he turned 4, he was adorable, eating and sleeping like a dream. Then he presses for anything physically weird, and she shakes her head. Nothing off at all except that his skin was just a little delicate. He goes on to say that after a birthday dinner, his condition spiraled out of control for about a year. He'd been loving that meal so much. Then she was completely shocked when he suddenly collapsed, throwing the maids into panic. He remembers that was the moment his mana finally ran dry. Syrup says everything only started getting better once he turned 6. Presses for that one crucial detail, and Syrup drops the truth. Back then, his meals were handled by a chef, but after that exact dinner, the chef had to retire on the spot, and the steward took over from there. Once that last clue clicks into place, everything snaps into focus. His eyes narrow, sharp as ice, and cold certainty hits. Only the head steward could have tampered with those poisoned meals. He found his answer, slipped into the room, and greeted the head steward like it was nothing, only to see the man chained to a chair, head swaddled in bandages. The steward jerked back, stunned. He kicked off the interrogation and told the steward, I've been thinking nonstop. Then he snapped a question, why did he get labeled that gross, fat toad? He insisted that if he'd grown right, he never would have ended up like this. And just to make it sting, he thanked the steward, straight up, for fixing his meals every single day. But food was the real problem. He dropped this huge, gelatinous glob onto the floor with a wet slap, muttering that it probably wouldn't sit right with his constitution anyway. He made it clear with zero drama. Staring straight at the bound man, he said someone had been poisoning him, and the steward jerked back, choking on his own breath. The steward snapped the moment it happened, yanking out, I've been ordered by the head of the Disgusto's family. And Luke stayed cool, asking straight up if he was just doing what his father told him. He figured his family just didn't care enough to roll up their sleeves. Then he dropped the bombshell. He'd been fighting the poison with healing magic the whole time, and every time he refused to die and got even healthier, it had to drive them insane. Once everything was laid out, he stormed straight up to the terrified man and demanded an answer. Was he the one poisoning the food? The steward could only stammer, shaking with terror. His resolve snapped in an instant. He dropped his head low and begged Luke for forgiveness, and Luke couldn't help but be shocked at how fast it happened. He let out a heavy sigh, calling the whole answer dull, then admitted he would have snapped for revenge if the steward had actually fought back, before declaring he'd forgive him, but only if one condition was met. Don't call this death, he snapped, swearing he'd never kill the steward. I'm using him as my test subject. Then a blinding, intricate magic circle flared in his hand, and he grinned as he branded it a little punishment. He finishes the spell, his voice slashing through the swirling dark as he hands the head steward the curse of sloth. Then the old man convulses, trapped in a storm of magic. Luke watches as the steward's eyes spring open, but they're empty, unfocused, and cold, and it finally hits him. His curse doesn't just harm someone, it hollows them out. Now it all clicks for him. He finally gets the full effect. With a cool, calm look, he waves the steward off and tells him to return to work, while the old man stays slumped in the armchair, limp and totally unresponsive. Meanwhile, out in another corner of the estate, Duke Disgustos sinks into the dark and sits alone. Eyes locked ahead, one cold thought burning clear as day. His worst enemy is his own son. Luke weighs his next move hard. He knows his father wouldn't even blink if he just fired the service workers like the steward. But pushing his father's direct rage would ignite a total disaster, so Luke chose something smarter. He incapacitated him instead. His goal isn't to wipe his father's pieces off the board. He's going to knock his pawns flat, leaving them breathing, but totally powerless and worthless. Later, as he strides through the drawing room, Sarah blurts his name and asks where he's been, and he fires back with a short, "Just out." She grins and says she knew he'd show up at the academy, then teases him. Did he ever think about skipping? Leaning in with a playful smirk, he flips the question right back, asking if she'd actually be happy if he told her he wasn't going. He admits to himself that skipping it was a smart move, because the academy is basically a death sentence. But he's already chosen his road, and he's only pretending he's considering anything else. Syrup just leans against him, calm and satisfied, and tells him that if she can, she wants to stay right beside him. She shuts her eyes and lets out a calm, knowing smile, because as long as her master is still breathing, her home isn't safe for a second, so she has to run. And yeah, this is the cost she's willing to pay to keep her life of comfort by his side. Luke had it all mapped out, lurking in the shadows, feeding the protagonist just enough to spark the clash between the royal family and the nobility, until the perfect moment hit. Then he'd destroy the noble leader, his own father, Duke Disgustos. He stared at the brutal life he'd been reincarnated into, knowing this route might give him the best shot at survival. But it wasn't some easy win, and the only comfort was this. It was the same game world he loved. With fresh fire in his chest, his face hardened as he made up his mind. He would go all in as Luke, because there was no way he was letting anyone kill him. 1 year later, his road finally brought him to the entrance exam grounds of Alessida's Royal Academy. He stepped up in a crisp uniform and flashed a confident smile as he said goodbye to Syrup, waiting by their carriage. She urged him to take care of himself, and he promised her without a doubt that he would. In the huge stone amphitheater, the instructor fired up the crowd of applicants, then laid it out. The entrance exam would hit them with 3 tests, magic, real combat, and an evaluation of who they truly were. Luke stood shoulder to shoulder with the other hopefuls when a nearby student sneered a nasty question about a beast man. Luke heard it loud and clear, but he shrugged it off, reminding himself the scholarship went to the top performers no matter who they were. His goal was simple: blend in, don't draw attention, and don't overdo it. Luke's focus got yanked when Syrup, up in the stands, jabbed a finger at the arena floor. Then she demanded whether the practical exams were starting, and surprise flashed across Luke's face like a spark. He snapped his gaze to the fighter, and then noticed it right away standing in the heart of the arena. Recognition hit him like a jolt. Luke met the beast woman with blazing green hair and emerald eyes, and he recognized her in a heartbeat. "Adventure, Ruby? So tell me, what other heroines are in this game?" She erupted with pure emotion, just a green streak that slipped past the instructor's lunging punch, and his strike missed by a hair, smashing into the stone where she'd been standing a second ago. She launched forward at blinding speed, an unstoppable storm of kicks and strikes that crushed her opponent before they could even catch their breath. With Beastman's wild strength and those unorthodox moves, the examiners couldn't help but be impressed. Luke, stuck on the sidelines, felt a sharp letdown as her match finally ended, like the whole thing was just hitting its stride. Then an examiner snapped, "Next contestant." The next examiner, the prophesied Sword Emperor, stepped up and grabbed a tiny creature that trembled in his palm, his face twisted with pure annoyance as he groaned about how much of a hassle this was. And that attitude even made another examiner wonder if his magic truly had no element. He let loose a raging flood of raw power, boom. The arena floor exploded in a burst of rock and dust, shattering everything beneath him. The blast hit with brutal force, and every onlooker froze in shock. An examiner yelled at him to stop, saying this was already too much. while adventurer Ruby stared at the display, eyes blazing wide with pure disbelief. Her surprise didn't last. It snapped into focused curiosity, and a tiny smile curled her lips as she sized up the boy's power. She was right. Once the Sword Emperor's opponent got completely beaten, they lifted a hand and threw in the towel. The very next day, the exam results went up, and there Luke sat, sprawled at home with syrup in hand, while Syrup flashed his acceptance letter like it was proof of destiny. Luke replayed his killer grades and insane Game World exam scores, and the fear of failing never even showed up. With his spot at the academy locked in, and the Sword Emperor standing among the new kids, the stage was finally set, because the adult romance strategy simulation was about to kick off. Luke Disgusto slips into a crisp new uniform and stares at his reflection like it's magic, amazed at how handsome he looks now. Just as he's about to leave, his maid Syrup rushes in to say the carriage is ready, then can't stop gushing about him, swearing she's never seen a man this perfect. Luke smiles, grateful, because he knows today isn't just a departure, it's the start of his brand new life. He pushes onward to the Elisado's Royal Academy, because this place is the oldest, most legendary school in the whole kingdom, where every huge dream, secret plan, and hidden ambition collides on one grand stage. On the student body, while almost every noble lines up for this school, it's recently started letting in the most talented commoners too, pushing for more recruits and sparking a wild, diverse competition. Because the kingdom is crawling with dungeons and monsters keep spilling out, everyone's forced to get real training. Self-defense is a must. At the academy, your lessons split into 3 big parts: battle, magic, and straight-up academic study. On top of all those martial and academic lessons, the academy turns into a top-tier research hub, pushing hard on magic development. So Luke's already hyped, because getting taught by legendary mages sounds like the kind of experience you don't forget. He realizes that winning here boils down to 2 things: leveling up his stats and playing the right moves with the love interests, and what story unfolds, and who he gets to meet, shifts based on those numbers. If he wants a specific ending, he has to micromanage every event and flag he triggers. With this knowledge in hand, he locks in a crystal-clear plan. He'll lean on the memories from his past life to back the story's protagonist, while he keeps playing the villain's role from right beside them, Luke, always hovering in the shadows. His whole mission is to dodge every normal path that ends in his death. He figures the story might already be spiraling off-screen from the game he remembers, because he's not that fat, ugly toad his character was supposed to be anymore. So he clamps down his panic and commits to surviving no matter what for the people who are counting on him. He snaps back from his thoughts as Syrup leans in and asks if he remembered everything. He grins, telling her she set it all up for him. He stays calm, but the worry etched across Syrup's face says it all. Panic explodes in her voice as she cries that she wanted to follow him as his attendant, even to clean his dormitory. But a stupid academy rule slams the door on that dream. She can't be more than 2 years older or younger than her student. Luke watches in silence as her crushing duty somehow only keeps getting stronger with every year. Luke clutched his hands together and laid out the academy's rule. Students could show up, but Syrup Sage, 7 years older than him, got disqualified, and it crushed him. He told her he was genuinely sorry, that he would have loved to stand beside her, but no matter how they fought it, the decision couldn't be changed. He kept going, saying it was normal for kids to lean toward others their age for this exact reason. But he couldn't name a single person who could take that spot for him. Syrup just sat there, listening in silence, her face giving nothing away. She spoke up about her worries, how he always ran on his own schedule, and how scared she was that the attendant her father assigned might not handle the job right. Luke tried to calm her down, insisting it would all turn out okay. He flashed a smile and tried to calm her fears, saying he could handle himself just fine, and that Karen would be at the academy too. At least that helped for a second, though he still couldn't shake the doubts. His reassurances barely scratched the surface. She wore a pained, stubborn look and said, straight to his face, that she just wanted to take care of him, and that honesty stunned him. Her heartfelt plea yanked a long-buried memory straight into his mind. Syrup had guarded him ever since he was a tiny baby. Staring at their linked hands, gratitude hit him like a wave, and he whispered his thanks to her. He sank into his memories of childhood, where his family never offered love or even a drop of affection. Syrup, though, she stepped in and filled the gap, giving him the care he'd been starving for. In his eyes, she was his. One and only family. He was sure of it, and the truth slammed into his mind. She'd always been his exclusive attendant, but lately she kept getting more and more to juggle, and his heart started pounding with urgency as he shouted her name. Before she could even answer, He yanked her into a sudden, crushing hug and blurted that what she'd done for him was more than he'd ever be able to repay. Then he swore, in solemn tones, that one day he'd reward her for everything. He pulled her in tight, his grip unbreakable, even as he knew this road wouldn't be easy. He breathed in, swore again in silence, and clung to his absolute determination, because he was going to find a way. He pulled her in tight, savoring the last warm moment of their embrace before he left. Then he admitted he'd miss her, and she smiled back, saying she'd miss him just as much. He leaned back just a bit and told her, "Keep the house running while I'm gone." Then he swore he'd come back for a brief window at the end of the year, begging her to hold out through the separation until then. She didn't argue. She just agreed. With their goodbyes finally said, his carriage lurched into motion, rolling away from the home they shared. He already knew they wouldn't be together for a while, but this separation only sharpened his resolve. From now on, he'd treasure Syrup more than ever, after his time at the academy and all the days that came after. Before he even stepped out the door, he made her a promise, plain and loud, telling her that once he graduated and finally left the territory behind, she was coming with him. Syrup froze, stunned, and demanded to know if he was really serious. He stared back with iron certainty, swearing he'd never, ever let her go. He lit up when she swore she wouldn't ditch his side, and Syrup slid in one condition, only if Karen agreed. Right after he laid out their shared future, he suggested they become a real family. And for a second she froze, then her face lit up with a blush and pure happiness. She agreed instantly, and it hit him hard just how deeply he loved her. So he finally reached the academy's main street, hood up, full focus, while the syrup-wielding figure waved him off, smiling and wishing him the best. Luke shot one last wave, then spun around and strode through those grand gates, ready to kick off the next chapter of his life. By the Dura reception, where he was supposed to meet the other new students, a young woman marched right up to him, said his name, and when he locked eyes with her, a weird flicker of recognition hit, like he'd seen her before somehow. The girl flashed a bright smile and raced to apologize for the late intro. Then she said her name, Libura Glicko, 15 years old, the Baron Malsai Glicko's daughter and the director's right hand in the Ministry of Magic. And she straight up told him she recognized him instantly, thanks to her father's description. A name hit him, Malsan's daughter, and the connection hooked him fast, since the only parent of a love interest he'd ever known was Morsky. Then Libura dropped the real reason she was here. She was the attendant his father had already arranged. That one bombshell flipped everything. She urged him to ditch the honorifics and just call her Libura. You remember, Libera's totally into magic, and her dad, Malsa, told her about it. When she confirms it, her eyes practically sparkle, and she blurts out that she loves magic and dreams of landing a job at the Ministry of Magic someday. He demanded to know why anyone would mock her for chasing that dream, and Libura fired back that people always react like that when a girl wants into the ministry. Luke didn't even flinch. He stared at her with pure conviction and promised, "I know you'll make it." His supportive words keep rolling as he tells her she's talented, that she works hard, and that she'll be just fine. Right when her serious face starts to crack and fade, replaced by a warm, beaming smile as she thanks him. Buoyed by his kindness, she suddenly says she wants to be closer to him, and Luke freezes like he didn't expect that, until she explains, straight up, that as his attendant she's determined to look after him. Luke tries to brush it off and insists he can handle himself, but she won't budge. Deep inside, she can't shake one thought. Why does he seem to like her so much? Her vibe turns razor-sharp. She shoves her glasses up and declares with full gravity that magic is an art form. And right then, a sudden "oh" hits Luke's face like a wave of realization. He finally sets her down. Because in the game, Libera is a total magic maniac. A witch whose obsessive love for spells keeps dragging her into one disaster after another, and you can only meet her by pumping up your magic stat. Realizing how intense she was, he tries to dodge the tension and tells her they should finish the dorm application first, then save the magic talk for later. But Libero cuts in fast, saying the paperwork is already handled, and he just freezes, utterly speechless. With that done, she spins around and asks right away if they should talk magic over the tea they've got, then practically begs to find a spot that serves tea since it's the perfect setup. Cut to them sitting in an outdoor cafe, where the sweet, fragrant aroma pours through the air. As he takes a sip of tea, he gushes about how delicious it is and thanks her for always sending some. Then Libera cuts in, right on target, and asks if she can share her honest take on his original spell, and he just nods, telling her to go for it. Right out of the gate, she bursts into a wild, rapid-fire breakdown of his magic. No traits, no answers, while she whips her hands around with non-stop excitement. Luke just stays quiet, But in his head, he can't help wondering if her intense obsession traces back to her father, Malsa. He leans in as Libra finishes her first assessment. She's impressed by his vow to master every corner of magic and the huge potential it holds. But she still points out that he's got more to refine. He can't help thinking Labura could be the perfect research partner, and he's already imagining her. And Mulsa, both of them buzzing with anticipation as their collaboration finally pays off, their excitement sinking like it's contagious. Two of them settle into a cozy outdoor table, and in the quiet pause between their sips, the whole world seems to slow as they finish their drinks. After a beat, Libera blares that the main event is right around the corner, and they need to get moving. So everyone springs up from their seats and starts heading out. They burst into the great hall of the Magic Academy, and the massive auditorium is already packed, every seat snapped up by students waiting for the entrance ceremony. His eyes cut across the crowd, and then it hits him. He spots familiar faces everywhere, key figures from a world he thought he'd left behind. Suddenly, an intense, piercing gaze locks onto him, snapping him out of his thoughts like a bolt of lightning. His head snaps toward the balcony above the hall, and there it is, pinned on him by that unbreakable stare, the Sword Emperor himself. The kid's eyes pin him from above. Then, a jolt of recognition flashes across the Sword Emperor's face as he finally clocks exactly who he's staring at. Luke's in his sights, and that intense gaze won't let up. The Sword Emperor starts to wonder, have they spotted him? His face tightens as one thought hits, and a terrible, gut-wrenching dread spreads through him. A burning, intense gaze pinned Luke in place, yet Luke met it head-on with a calm, thoughtful stare. This was supposed to be their first-time meeting, but the other boys' reactions told a different story. Somehow, Luke was already known to the Sword Emperor. At what looks like an academy assembly, Libera Glicko spots Luke wearing disgust on his face, then sees his troubled expression and snaps. What's wrong? Luke blurts that he can't figure out why that one boy is staring at him like Luke's his arch-enemy. Libera asks who he means, and Luke just says, "Oh, him." Libera tells Luke that Dan, the knight apprentice, is tied to the Marshall family, the banner of the royal faction, the very crew those of them lead who hate the noble faction on the other side, and Luke snaps to the truth with a grim realization. Fate has been setting them up as enemies since birth. Then Libera drops another bomb. She's heard Lynch will show up this summer. And as she speaks, Luke notices the martial arts master sitting right beside Dan, absolutely top tier. She keeps rolling out her detailed report, flat out calling that woman Linkian of House Marshall. Then she locks in on Dan as her attendant and says his appraisal is growth. And she acts like she's got everyone cataloged. She points out Linkian's appraisal is the attribute shield. And even though she's not magic skilled, she's basically a walking attribute dictionary. Bera talks, and Luke's thoughts suddenly slide off track to the ugly history he can't stop remembering, lynching. In his head, he files her under pity. A love interest a player can marry, no matter how badly they botch everything with the others. Then he imagines her future like a sweet little script. A devoted wife, in love with her husband and her kids. It opens a deadly alternate route. If anyone but the protagonist wins her heart, Luke is the one who claims it, and later she shows up as Luke's wife, right by his side as the protagonist's enemy. In that route, he realizes the unavoidable showdown isn't just part of the story. It's what reveals her true beauty, and he even thinks it's praiseworthy how her pure, loyal heart ends up being exactly what brings her down. Then your thoughts snap to Dan's past. Yeah, he started as a commoner, but his father was an honorable knight with tribute magic in his blood. Dan followed that path from day one, clawing at monster battles and training non-stop since childhood, so when it was time, he slid into the academy just as the Lynchons arrived. Dan's past lit a fire in him. He's determined to honor his father's legacy at the academy and rise as a knight of House Marshall. But Luke gets the real reason behind Dan's rage. It's the disgust those family members and the noble faction's leaders bring that Dan can't stand. That foreknowledge crushes Luke like a weight on his chest. He lets out a heavy sigh, groaning at how much of a mess this is, and figures that pretty soon he'll be counted by another person too. Just then his eyes snap to the stage as the valedictorian speech gets announced, and a girl named Irina Shilty Bordalesidas is called up. Irina, the first princess of the kingdom of Alasadas, kicks off her huge speech, and Luke immediately leans toward Libera, whining that he's bored out of his mind. Libera asks if he's even interested in the princess, pointing out her stunning beauty, but Luke shuts it down, convinced Irina is just another love interest he'll have to survive through during school life. He sized up Irina. Yeah, she looked like a princess, no doubt, but in the game he never once cared about her. He was already used to pretty faces thanks to his sister Iris. His mind snapped back to his situation, and he told Labura the truth. He already had a fiancée, and he still loved someone else too. So with two people like that in his life, he couldn't let his guard down for even a second. She asked if he planned to take a nap, and he admitted he'd be more than happy to sink into that pillow, just not here, not right now. Labure grinned and said, "Perfect," then promised she'd wake him the moment the ceremony was over. True to his word, he crashed into sleep in his seat while the ceremony rolled on, and Libero kept a watchful eye on him. Massive relief flooding him because he'd just proven what an understanding guy he really was. When the hall finally emptied, she nudged him awake, soft but urgent. He blinked, groggy and still, and asked if the ceremony was already done. Then he sat up, clutching his pillow, and questioned whether this was the secret one she'd been teasing, the one everyone kept talking about. He remembered her father telling him she was actually floating on a pillow the moment they met, then praising her as a beautiful girl. So delighted by his bold honesty, Libera thanked him, confessed that she loves people who speak their minds, and Luke couldn't help but gush about how soft the pillow felt, even offering to let her ride it whenever he had spare time. Her excitement practically buzzed in the air. Then frustration snapped as she clenched her fists, already dreading the orientation coming up, and he couldn't help thinking, she must truly love mages. Seeing her falling apart, he snapped into action and said they needed to move now. Then he grabbed her hand and pulled, and she just froze, stunned. He coolly told her it was totally fine, and she blushed as she spilled her shock. She'd never held a boy's hand before, and she couldn't stop talking about how soft his felt. A small smile tugged at his lips, and he said, basically, "I already stole a maiden's first, so now I'm escorting you to our classroom." With that, they strolled down the corridor, fingers locked tight, while Lynch and Marshall watched from the shadows, and her face sharpened with cold, seething intensity. She watched them drift away, fingers locked, and when her voice finally cracked through, all she could spit out was one word: coward. He stayed totally unbothered, told Libra to calm down and just ignore the outburst, and when she was flustered, she yanked her hand back, swearing up and down that they weren't doing anything wrong. She asked if he wasn't angry, but he answered in a calm voice that there was no point wasting energy on it. Labura smiled, saying that was so totally him. Then he flashed her a small smile and basically said he'd rather spend that energy talking to her, straight up, and it totally blindsided Libero. Her surprise snapped into a radiant smile the moment she admitted she loved talking with him too. And when he told her his chats had been fun for her, she grinned and happily agreed, like there was nothing better than that. Once it was settled, Luke announced, "All right, let's get this orientation over with." And they burst into the huge lecture hall marked Class 0, already packed and buzzing with students, and sure enough, everyone was there. Now it was all about picking seats. At the front of the hall, a slick-haired man with glasses surged forward to introduce himself as Glorn Research, the teacher for Class 0, and Luke instantly clocked him. It was the same instructor who had explained everything back in the game. Just after his intro, a woman with long, pale hair stepped forward and declared, "I'm Silas, your assistant teacher." Luke's eyes snapped wide because there she was, the witch who once stared into the abyss of magic, the same elf who's been around for centuries, and the most brutal love interest he could ever try to win. As orientation kicked off, Glorin stepped forward and fired up the assembled students, saying every kid in Class 0, especially the 3 scholarship students, nailed the entrance exam, and at this academy nobody cared about status. Your abilities were the only thing that mattered, and one scholarship girl, Muriel, hung on his every word. Muriel heard the declaration and fired back with a question. If they were judged on skill alone, how were they supposed to rank themselves or compare to everyone else? Glorin lit up and called it brilliant. Then Lynch and Marshall shot their hands up, and the teacher picked Muriel on the spot. Glorin just shrugs off the last question and bursts into class with a brand new device. Then grins and swears this magic watch will finally let them measure their true potential. At Libera's command, Luke raises his wrist and starts pumping mana through the watch. Then bam, a blazing flash erupts, and it jolts him back in surprise. Glorin keeps driving his point home, jabbing the air as he explains the new invention. It records every student's own man of signature, so they can pull up their grades and see exactly where they rank. A burst of light spills from the watch screen, and Luke instantly spots it. This is the stat screen from the Academy section of the game. It flashes his details. Luke Hugolo Disgustos, 15 years old, level 1, and his assignment to Class 0. He whips around to Lee Burra and confirms it. This recognition system is powered by a man's own signatures. From the front, Glorn nods and tells everyone, "Yeah, we all get recorded, but only you can see your own razor-sharp details." Glorin keeps talking, saying their grade rank and class standings are out in the open for the faculty to see. Then Luke's eyes snap to his own stats, where his magic types are listed, and one attribute is blank, so he instantly guesses it's Val. The class public rankings drop, and Irina Elisades snatches the overall 1 spot, while Ruby gets crowned the practical one, but lands in 10th overall. The list keeps rolling. Labura snatches magic rank 1, and the murals lock down studies rank 1 too. Labura flashes a tiny, confident thumbs up like, "Told you." With the top spot announcement hanging in the air, Glorin swivels to Luke, rank number 2, and demands his take, and Luke just smirks like he saw this coming all along. His teacher, swept up in his own fire, bursts into a speech about how magic tools have no equal, claiming they're the greatest weapon humanity has to move forward, while Silas beside him keeps trying, failing, to drag him back into the lesson as. Right as the teacher's weird show finally wraps up, Luke whips his head toward the girl next to him. "So, how'd your grades go, Libra?" he asks, and Libra just stares off like she's miles away, brushing off the instructor as a total freak and a magic maniac, not even catching that Luke meant her. The classroom goes dead quiet. Every student sits up straight, eyes forward, hanging on for whatever comes next in the orientation. At the front of the room, assistant teacher Silas snaps everyone's attention by clearing her throat, then declares, "All right, cool time," and lays out how life at the academy works, stressing that they're free to choose whatever they want. She keeps talking, and on her fingertip a tiny flame flickers like a warning light, proof of how alive the moment is. "Your growth," she says, "is in your hands. Grades aren't the only thing that decide your rank, so pick the classes you truly think will shape your future." Her face hardens as she clenches her fist, and she lays down a ruthless warning. If their grades slip, they'll be dragged down to a lower class without mercy. Then she pauses and drops the one exception that changes everything. The only exception, a massive Colosseum-sized grand event run by the Sword Emperor Cusp. Silas says this is the Academy's biggest event. Every year it pulls the whole world's eyes to it. And she adds that even if a student's magic and grades are weak, a great showing will keep them climbing in the top classes. Her words hit the students like a thunderclap, especially Dan, whose face snaps into razor-sharp focus. Silas then lays it out. The winner earns an honorary knight title and gets the chance to challenge the National Sword Emperor Cup winner. She urges them all to chase that goal at least once. And for Dan, it clicks instantly. His #1 mission is simple: become a knight. If you want knighthood and nobility, plus perks like traveling freely between territories, your ticket is simple: win the school Sword Emperor Cup. She says that if you run this system, practice matches are allowed, and they're also called ranking battles. She tells the class that the exact rules are tucked right on their watches, but she's giving them the quick rundown. Then she hits the real bombshell. Your own rank has to be in place, or you can't even start a battle. Then she digs into the rules. Lower-ranked students can call out higher-ranked ones, and even if the challenge party can't dodge, the duel won't start until they accept. So if the challenger wins, they rip the opponent's rank for themselves and get moved into the matching class right after. The rules keep rolling. Luke can challenge for either solo fights or team battles, and he gets to pick which on the spot. But you're only allowed one of each per day, and if you get sick, your rep can step in for you, while anyone who drags their feet and refuses gets slapped with a default loss. And as Luke reads all of it, he can't shake the shock. This system is weirdly lenient toward the loser. He clocks this whole setup like he's seen it in a game he knows by heart. Every rule is built to throw him, the villain, straight into a deadly matchup with Dan, the hero, and he gets the grim job. He has to be the first one to drop in these ranking battles to lock in their fated rivalry, for good, even if, to him, it just feels like an annoying chore. As Luke frets over his mess, Dan suddenly rockets his hand up, snagging Merle's attention. Then he blurts out to the teacher, all fired up and eager to speak. He demands to know when they'll finally start clashing with others in ranking battles, and Silas tells him the moment they're registered on their watches. Challenges are good to go. So Dan wastes zero time and declares he's ready to challenge someone right now. He shoots up from his seat, arm thrusting out as he points straight across the classroom, and he roars his challenge to everyone, calling out Luke Hugolo Disgustos by name. Two boys lock eyes across the room, and the second a soft chime rings, Luke's watch lights up. The challenge is official, and the fight ignites. He gets it instantly. This is the tutorial battle, the very first scripted step set up for a villainous noble. Luke Disgustos and the knight apprentice Dan didn't start as enemies by accident. This rivalry was ripped from an old fight that was supposed to be a simple tutorial. Luke had walked into it with nothing but raw magical talent and walked out getting smashed. And ever since, he'd hunted Dan relentlessly, chasing revenge for that crushing humiliation. That bitter history pushed them into this exact mess. While Dan soaked up a satisfying academy life with friends, Luke had to sit on the sidelines, simmering with resentment, seething but. Dan threw down a formal challenge, and Luke's reaction totally shocked everyone. Because the Luke who'd normally lose his mind at a commoner's dare just waved it off and said, straight up, that he wouldn't do it. Dan's calm no totally blindsided him, so he snapped that Luke must be scared, only for Luke to stay ice-cold at his desk, say he's ranked 2, and demand Dan's rank. Dan shot back that his rank was nothing but a pain. Dan blurted, stunned beyond disbelief, while Muriel snapped with pure frustration. Dan shot back that he was ranked 20, and that while Luke could climb higher, he had nothing to win. But Luke just shrugged. He wasn't about to spar with an idiot who couldn't grasp something this basic. She charged right up to Luke and confronted him head-on, demanding to know why he refused to fight, yelling that, as a noble of their glorious country, accepting a challenge had to be automatic for him. Rage sparked in her, but it burned out fast, replaced by a calmer, still flustered approach. Admitting he was a hot-headed troublemaker, she pointed out his grades were good, then pressed him again, and Luke only shot back. I'll pass. Muriel shot them down with a final, simple refusal, and Muriel stormed away looking crushed, muttering that everything was just too troublesome. As she left, Luke leaned toward Libra and laid out his creed in a low voice, because helping people straight up goes against his own no-effort principle. He wants to help, but only from behind the scenes. Right when it looked like everything was finally over, a fresh voice burst in. Princess Irina Alessida stepped forward, shattering the mood with her surprising mural reveal. She declared she'd love to see the two of them face off. Dan, meanwhile, leaned on his killer practical score and absolutely shut down anyone trying to brag about magic. Then the moment kept building, and she spoke straight to him, calm but immovable, telling him that backing out of the challenge would slam his rank down and pushing him to obey the Academy's rules. Then she hit him with the real truth. A noble of the country must lead the people. Princess Irina stands her ground, and he can't escape how infuriating this whole situation is, because she's declaring it's his duty, and she won't let him refuse. He keeps pushing forward, throwing questions in the air like, did I really hear that right? Academy status isn't decided by greatness alone. He lets out a tired sigh, admitting it's brutal to say no to both a princess and a duke's daughter. And honestly, he can't stand this princess at all. Right beside him, Libera watches his frustration boil. Dan's voice cuts across the room, and he immediately chimes in, agreeing that the princess is right. He stood beside Muriel, watching everything unfold, and realized Luke was too weak to fight the tide of events on his own. Now in the middle of that massive arena, Luke lets out a weary sigh. He knows he's got no choice, but man, does it feel awful. He just wishes he could stay still, not move another step, when a tiny, translucent, magical little familiar materializes right beside him. As he strides with Libera, Dan, and Muriel, his familiar drifts right beside him, buzzing with questions. How's he going to lose, and is he really okay? And deep inside, Dan steels himself. If he's going to play Luke, then he has to lose this duel. Vara whips around to face him and says she's heard he hates exercise with a passion. Then warns that his opponent, Dan, is Duke Marshall's knight apprentice, one of the legendary fighters, and his exam scores scream that he's been training for combat for ages. He flashes a confident grin and shuts down her worries like it's nothing. Don't stress. I've got this piece of cake. Her eyes flare behind her glasses, and you can practically see her admiration sparkle as she drinks in his sudden, unexpected confidence. She grins at him, praising him as a truly mysterious soul, then declares he's birthed magic nobody else has ever imagined. Yet somehow he still won't raise a fist to fight. For a noble, it's a wild choice, and Luke simply asks if that's exactly what she thinks. She leans in fast, reassures him, and tells him straight up she meant it as a compliment. He frowns, totally lost, asking how his actions even connect to what she said. Then Libera breaks it down. For her, nobles matter a lot, so much it hits her pride right in the heart. He flashes a soft smile and tells her, as long as you don't hate me, I'm good. That surprising warmth hits Libera like a lightning strike, leaving her completely stunned. Lustered, she clamps her hands to her face and blurts out a furious denial. She swears she'd never, ever dislike me. From just a short distance, Dan and Muriel stare in, their faces set in stern focus as they track the pair. Luke strides toward the grand arena, where empty stands loom over the dueling grounds, and he mutters that he hasn't stepped foot here since the entrance exam. Just as they lock in their positions, Glorn Research strides up to the line, smirking as he spots the crowd of classmates already glued to the stands. Are you two ready? He asks. Dan snaps into a ready crouch, Luke keeps his eyes on him, and the air tightens with a sharp, focused stare. He jabs a finger straight at Luke, promising he'll smash that rotten attitude out of him. Then Dan admits he'd been watching Luke the whole exam, seeing him do nothing but lie there the entire time. Libero looks worried, but Luke stays cool and tells her to wait. Dan yells at him to not ignore him, but Luke just waves it off. Yeah. With a freezing stare, Luke snaps that Dan should be grateful he's even willing to fight him. His opponent snarls for his level, and Luke freezes for a beat, scrambling for the whole idea, back when you level up by smashing monsters. Then he shrugs and drops the truth. It was basically a game, so he maxed it the moment he first hit it. And after that, he never cared enough to check again, because he's convinced strategy and fundamentals matter way more. He stays totally calm and declares, "It's one, Dan." And the moment Dan hears it, he can only blurt out a confused noise, utterly stunned, like his brain just short-circuited. Dan's confusion curdles into pure disbelief. Then rage erupts. He clenches his fist and yells that Luke has never even battled a monster, demanding to know what nobility has anything to do with fighting, before snapping that Luke is even worse than Dan ever imagined. Right before the argument explodes, a crisp, formal voice slices through the tension. An announcer with a monocle booms that the duel is starting, naming challenger Dan and the defender of the higher rank, Luke Hugolo Disgustos, then orders both of them to step forward. Dan heeds the call and lifts his sword, jaw set with grim determination, while Luke just shrugs and casually suggests they go have a nice fight. With the fighters locked in, the announcer's roar blasts the air, and the duel finally kicks off. Dan rockets forward and slashes in one quick lunge. Luke's eyes flicker as the hit rushes toward him, and he realizes this is nothing like the turn-based game he used to play. No prompts, no commands, just pure motion. With only one path left, he shouts a name, Val. Right on cue, when Luke calls, a tiny, squishy slime pops out of his open palm. Val, Luke snaps. You've got full control for 1 minute. And makes sure nobody gets seriously hurt, then tells himself he'll surrender the second he wakes up, while Val chirps like he's totally on board. The creature shoots forward to cut off Dan's falling blade, smothering the sword with its nasty, gelatinous body. And Dan's eyes blow wide with shock at the sudden defense, right as Luke throws his faith into his summit. With his defense locked in, Luke's face lights up with a confident, knowing grin, while in the background, Dan keeps getting battered by those shockingly tough creatures. Suddenly, that confident look shatters. He winces, staring at his own hand with a pained grunt, and confusion crashes over him as he tries to figure out why it feels so wrong. Then Luke realizes his body is moving without him. His hand shoots out and grabs Dan's face as Dan thrashes and yells for release. In a blur of pure instinct, Luke's body slips across Dan's swords, disarms him, and launches him backward with one crushing kick. And in the middle of it all, one detached thought hits Luke. Whoops. He looms over the fallen opponent, his sword clattering uselessly to the ground, and with a clenched fist he coils for his next strike. Face grim, no mercy left. From the stands, Duke Disgustos watches the result with a smug grin, confirming Dan isn't badly hurt, exactly like he demanded. Then he smirks, saying that every time Dan screws up, the match stays rigged. Luke was always built to finish it with that secret attribute magic technique, and with everything set, the Duke is sure his son can't possibly lose. On the field, though, Luke flips the script. He lunges forward, dead set on ending the match himself. His fist rockets toward Dan, but right at the last second, his grip unfurls. He softly cradles the back of Dan's head and murmurs, "Sleep." And just like that, it's already too late for Dan to do a thing. He knows Dan's got that rare power, tribute magic that shoots his magic sky high, cranks up his physical strength too, and makes everything hit harder. But right now, Dan's still too inexperienced, so it won't unleash its full punch yet. And since Dan's still new at magic, his tolerance is super low, so the sleep spell hits him hard and he can't fight it off. Luke just watches, thinking, I'm not meant to lose, because if the villain actually wins this duel, that would spell trouble for him. As Dan's consciousness starts to slip away, he forces himself to trick the onlookers, while Luke keeps gripping him upright, and the spell finally locks in and hits full power. But just as he's about to collapse, Val the slime monster bursts in out of nowhere and swallows him whole. Then Lynch and Marshall in the stands shout in panic, while Glorin's research team freezes in stunned silence, staring at the chaos. The chaos explodes, and the duel announcer snaps into action. She declares Luke Hugolo Disgustos the winner, then begs him to let Dan go. Her bold declaration changes nothing. When the slime brutally slams Dan into the stone floor, horror rips through her as she shrieks his name, and he crumples unconscious. As he lay unconscious on the ground, Lin Shen dropped to her knees, her face twisted with rage. She snapped at Luke, screaming that he was scum and accusing him of attacking Dan even after he'd already passed out. Luke didn't flinch. He stared down at them and muttered that she had zero noble pride, calling her actions pathetic for dragging down the victor. He kept his face ice-cold and unmoving, insisting he never wanted a fight at all. He only got dragged into it, and his opponent should have seen exactly what was coming. With Linkian and Dan in hand, he strode up to the whole student crowd and declared right then and there that he'd take on any challenge for a ranking match, basically asking, "Come on, isn't this a win for you too?" Lynch's bold declaration stunned everyone for a split second, while Luke slapped his own forehead and muttered that he might be wiped out right now, baiting the crowd even more, and Lynch could only clench her teeth and seethe with pure frustration. He scanned the silent stands, begging anyone to step up, but got nothing back. No one moved. Then he snapped that he'd seize this moment and teach them all something they couldn't ignore. From the seats, Libra Glico watched the whole scene play out, and with a calm, steady voice, she praised both the brilliant minds and everyone who gave their lives to chasing magic. Luke's voice sliced through the silence, booming his lesson loud and clear. He can't stand fools who only swing brute force, no brain behind it. Then he flicked his hand toward Dan's sprawled, unconscious body and called him a barbarian without a second thought. His eyes narrowed to a terrifying point, and a cold vow snapped into place. If anyone else like Dan, the barbarian, dared to rise up and challenge him, he'd make sure they'd never see another day, crushing their chance to challenge him ever again. The rest of the students just froze, stunned silence swallowing the whole room. Towering over the battered Dan, Lynch and Marshall clenched their fists and snapped that these inhuman acts won't be left to slide. While Luke Disgustos, watching from afar, prays his villain routine will shut down any more trouble, even as he's already sure the whole class will be whispering about it. She whirls on Luke and screams that he'll regret this, that Dan will beat him eventually. Then she storms off, while Luke stays cool and asks Libra if she's sure she won't spill anything, and Libra fires back, "What do you mean?" He casually admits he's lazy, and then, boom, a memory snaps into place. Right before Dan would have slammed the ground, Luke secretly summoned a huge slime to catch him and cushion the fall completely. He tells Libura he's had his fill of trying to talk to Dan for today, then shuts it down hard, calling Dan an idiot who starts fights with a loud, self-righteous idea of justice. So explaining anything feels pointless. Luke decides he'd rather kick back and pour his energy into his magic studies. He admits her logic hits the mark, but the second she adjusts her glasses, she presses, "Are you really sure?" Then, with a tired sigh, she makes it clear she's not buying it. Princess Irina Alessida strides up to them and, with perfect manners, calls him, "Your Highness," then instantly demands he drop the title and call her Irina, so she can hear what she wants to ask. Luke shoots back, "Just call me Luke," and tells her to go ahead. She thanks him for what she calls a compliment, then smirks that the only other person who looks at her like that is her brother, Testa, because Luke's own brothers are in the same year and they're basically the top two students. Then Irina's patience snaps. She can't stand dealing with Luke, since he still doesn't get that her royal status means he can't treat her like everyone else. Her face melts into something warm. She thanks it for finding her the perfect match and admits she finally gets him now. Then she urges him to live up to the Disgusto's name, only for her thoughts to trail off before the rest of the sentence ever lands. She snaps up an excuse and walks off, ditching Luke and Libera in the dust. Libera stares after her, thinking out loud that maybe the princess doesn't hate him after all, and Luke just can't figure out why she showed up to talk to him in the first place. Burra beams at him, cheering him on for surviving orientation day. And when she asks what's bothering him, Luke glances up at the sky and waves it off, saying it's nothing to worry about. He stood on the balcony, staring at the giant, glowing estate under the night sky, and just as the silence settled, Karen's voice snapped from behind, asking what he was doing out there. He shot back that he was only catching his breath, and inside, the table sat stacked with spotless plates like a trophy for the meal. Karen beamed with a glass in her hand and admitted she'd stuffed herself because it had been way too long since she last tasted his cooking. Then she leaned into a happy confession. She was so relieved he liked it because she'd gone all out for him. He confessed that nothing in the world lifted his spirits like her food. Then, when she lit up with that smile, he glanced away and begged her not to hype him up too much, because one more compliment and he'd start flying off the handle. She brushed off his modesty and told him, straight up, that his wins were all his, and that she'd only tossed him a few bits of advice. He grinned at her, urging her to run wild with her praise because she was ridiculously accomplished, too. Every one of her successful projects proved it. Her face turned dead serious as she pushed back. insisting that being too humble was a problem. She genuinely wanted to heap praise on him, but he brushed it off hard, saying the credit belonged to her for turning his ideas into a business, and to his Caribbean family for their unwavering support. Aaron erupted in a laugh, calling himself the only noble crazy enough to say something like that. Then he waved it off and told her not to worry, because with his Caribbean family backing him, money was already flowing down to him, and he was getting rich off it. That whole stretch of their long history, every conversation they'd ever had, hung in the air, thick and electric, as Karen slid her hand over his and fixed him with an intense look, asking if he really meant it. He snapped back instantly, dead serious. She stared at him, her voice dropping low. "Hey, Luke, do you still only love me for my cooking?" She knew he caught every detail, her laid-back life, her family's cold indifference, and how he'd started loving her through her cooking, yet somehow never stopped loving all of her. He dropped to one knee in front of her and cut her off mid-breath, then blurted that he couldn't live without her anymore, swearing he'd love her more than anything, even if their families crumbled. Red-faced, she snapped back that they weren't married yet. With a warm grin, he thrust his hand toward her and begged, "Please let me stay by your side tonight." That sweet, gentle smile slipped across her lips as she gazed at him and whispered, "So, you're a villain." As he clutched Karen close mid-flight, she warned, "If you bring anyone but syrup on these walks in the sky, I'll turn jealous." He swore he'd remember, and the very next morning a brand new day kicked off. On an early run, night apprentice Dan burst into the street and froze, because someone was already up and moving, and when he finally spotted the figure, his stomach dropped. It was one of the Disgustos, and he couldn't even begin to guess what they were doing out there at that hour. His surprise snapped into suspicion when he saw a weird aura pouring off Luke, and his gut screamed that the Disgustos might be cooking up a villain scheme. So he activated his trace ability and spied from a safe distance to find out. What he saw wasn't some scripted trick, it was pure beauty. Luke flowed through it all with flawless, graceful motion, like a dancer mid-performance, but Dan's smile vanished the moment he clocked the truth. These weren't just moves, they were the work of a master martial artist. That aside pushed Dan to rethink his earlier loss, because he knew muscles and skill usually get stronger with your level. So losing to someone far weaker shouldn't happen, unless the real problem wasn't his defense. He'd first blamed himself for letting his guard slip, but now he finally got it. Luke wasn't just high level. He was insanely strong in every other way, strong enough to smash straight through a huge level gap. He clenched his fist, replaying the moment Luke acted like a carefree, spoiled noble. And then it hit him. Beneath that act, Luke was grinding like a true hard worker, and this kind of truth felt unlike anything he'd ever seen, but he knew it was real. That new truth hit him like a punch, forcing him to stare at his own path. He'd trained every single day in that martial territory, convinced fighting was everything, and that his grind would finally make him a great knight. But now he was staring at the ugly fact. No matter how hard he trained, he couldn't catch up to Luke. And then this weird, uneasy feeling started crawling up inside his chest. At dawn, he stared over the city, and right then, he knew this revelation wouldn't leave his head until he figured it all out. As he broke into another sprint, everything inside him snapped into focus, his biggest problem. The martial training had forged his strength, but he had no clue how to use it, and he knew it. He hated studying, didn't understand his own attribute magic, yet he clenched his teeth and vowed to power through. Grateful the Academy's learning environment was top-notch. Frustration finally burst out of him in a scream. This wasn't some game. He swore he'd beat Luke, but then his rivals, razor-focused faces slammed into his mind, and one brutal thought hit him hard. He couldn't even picture a way to pull it off. He clenches his teeth, that stubborn glint burning in his eye even through the bandages on his face. And yeah, he's only been beaten by Luke once. That loss, he won't live with it. He swears he'll surpass him someday, no question. But as he watches Luke sprint along the distant castle walls at dawn, it hits him. Between them, there's a mountain-sized gap. Luke's so far ahead he's blurry, yet he still radiates this almost sacred power, like an aura carved by gods. A few hours later, inside the Academy cafeteria, Luke and Labure pushed up to the breakfast line. And then, at the next table, Iris sipped her honey tea and greeted them politely. She tells Luke to make sure he eats a real breakfast, and he nods like, "Got it." But then Luke can't stop staring. How can she still take care of everyone when her own low blood pressure is wrecking her, and her mood is clearly in the gutter? He can't help but think the Academy changed her. Now she actually knows how to care for others. And as a high-ranking noble, she's forced to carry herself with razor-strict grace and a gentle kindness. And it's only made her beauty shine brighter and her divine voice grow even stronger. He still remembers it, how Iris was the mastermind behind the noble faction's newcomer party. He showed up as the freshman rep to greet everyone, but the second he spoke, attention snapped to him because he just flipped the script on the royal faction and stole the spotlight. Luke snaps his mind back to the here and now, bids his sister a quick goodbye, and heads out with Libera. While Libera hesitates, thinking about urging a supplement for Iris's low blood pressure, and Iris just tells Luke to give it his best. As he strides through the academy halls, he feels it. Those wild rumors about his sensational first fight have blown up everywhere, and when he gets closer, students scatter out of his way, making a huge open space around him. He mentally lays out every reaction. The noble faction praises him with respect and admiration, the royal faction openly spits at him with disgust and contempt, and the center faction plus the commoners just hover in confusion, like they're trying to figure out what he's really about. He finally slips into his seat and exhales like he just survived a disaster. His threats must have landed, because for now the other students keep their distance, and he can breathe and focus on studying in peace. He studied the academy's curriculum and saw it was split into two kinds of classes: required courses for general education and electives that drilled practical magic skills. Realizing it ran like a real-world university, he knew his very first move was choosing what to enroll in. He remembered that in the game that lesson only pumped up your stats, and with a confident grin, he shrugged it off like it was nothing, then decided to pick whatever he wanted. With freedom in hand, he swore off every single practical subject. He figured the required classes would be plenty. Sure, he craved more magic knowledge, but only because he was chasing the ultimate laziness. His road was set. One goal, and it was straight to magic. Right then, Libera Glicko swept up and declared that the lessons were done for the day. Then she leaned in and asked if he'd picked his courses. He nodded, saying his focus was magic and magic tools, with the mandatory subjects as extras. Libera grinned, spun around with a quick snap of motion, and fired off. "All right, let's go." Her sudden declaration made him blurt out, "So where are we going?" And she flashed a bright grin, telling him they were headed to a private training room, just the place to study up or drill their skills anytime they needed. She leaned in and spread a map of the academy grounds, pointing out what each student could actually use, and it all came down to class rank. But since he was the class hero, he got first pick of any facility, and Luke instantly realized he'd just landed yet another huge advantage. They rolled up to their destination fast. Libera pointed at a wall of huge doors and declared, "This is it." As they headed inside, Luke couldn't shake the thought that the academy would publicly slam ranks on the students just to keep the rivalry burning hot. The doors swing open, and there it is, a gigantic hall with nothing in it, stretching forever. Luke freezes, stunned by how massive it feels, and Libera nods like, "Yeah, this needs one last little touch." She drops to her knees and holds her hand near the floor. She drove her palm into the floorboards with a brutal slam. With a thunderous burst, a brilliant magic circle snapped into existence at the impact point, ripping open the whole room. Then, in the blink of an eye, the empty hall detonated into a full high-tech training ground, platforms and structures forging themselves out of that glowing light. She flashed a proud grin and declared the space was back to normal size, leaving Luke stunned, mouth open, staring in pure awe. He finally steadied himself and nodded along. Yeah, they could study in peace now. Then he leaned in and dropped the truth. Because he was the only magic user in his whole household, the basic spells she used, the ones no book even bothers to explain, were, to him, the rarest kind. His excitement spilled out fast. "Teach me," he urged, and she didn't hesitate. She agreed right away. She kicked off the lesson by pointing out the glowing pattern on the floor and calling it a magic circle. Then she warned it was smaller than the ones used with ordinary tools. "Precision matters," she said, like every word was a rule of life, because if you don't draw that circle perfectly, the spell won't work right. And yeah, she made it clear this kind of accuracy doesn't come in one shot. He shoved her words into action, wrestling a tiny, shapeless chunk of mana into something real, and in the process he stared straight at what magic is asterisk. Sure, it's handy, but it costs you. This was attributeless magic. It ran on mana alone, and if your imagination didn't fire on all cylinders, you crumpled. Attribute magic felt simpler at first, but if you wanted to truly master it, you had to dig deep and understand it down to the bone. Libera's bright enthusiasm cut through his thoughts, and she declared that this very complexity was exactly why magic was so damn fascinating. He nodded along, feeling the weight of its profound depth with. Once they finished their first practice round, they slid over to a table and got right into it. Libera insisted they start by jotting down their info, and Luke didn't hesitate, straight up agreeing. They checked her info first, and when they flagged her attribute as water, Luke immediately saw how many tricks it could pull off. Libera just burst with excitement, ready to test how it could swing a fence, shore up defense, and even support the whole team. Then he slapped his info onto the table, slid the paper across with a grin, and told her, straight up, to expect big things from him because she'd have plenty of uses for his abilities. Her excitement crashed into shock the moment she read the details. She demanded to know why he'd reveal something this sensitive, insisting magic like that must stay secret. He brushed it off, saying he'd just describe it to others like ordinary magic that bends human bodies. Her worry didn't vanish, but he stepped in fast and told her everything was okay. Malsaglico already knew. Then he flashed that confident smile and with real seriousness asked her to keep his secret. Because he trusted her, Libera keeps her promise. She swears she'll guard his secret, then thanks him for believing in her. She swallows his condition like it's the only way forward, and her brain instantly spirals as she pieces it together. So that sleepability he talked about is exactly what he used to knock Dan out so fast. And yeah, this magic is unlike anything she's ever seen, the kind he labels slob. He reads her silent excitement and blurts that he feels the same, and Libera, hands clasped tight, tells him just how badly she's waiting to see what he'll do with those brand-new, one-of-a-kind powers. His gaze snaps to a device on the table where a section under attributeless magic just says unknown. Libera clocks what it's looking at Val and fires off a theory. The magic watch can't track or record original magic because it's not logged in any database. She snaps back to her realization. If that watch could appraise tribute magic, adventurers would stop guessing and start hunting with total intel, reshaping how dungeons get explored. Luke chimes in with a theory that it's probably pulling details straight from the Ministry of Magic's central database. Even though the magic watch screams limitless future, Libera snaps her own excitement down fast, pointing out the brutal truth. Cramming that kind of complex function into a tiny device is insanely hard. The hardware's mana capacity is way too low, and getting a decent range would take rare, lightweight metals. In the classroom, teacher Glorn Research blares out the next extracurricular, dungeon practice, and tells every first-year student they have to survive it, while Luke, grimacing at his desk, internally groans that this is going to be a total nightmare. Lauren kicks off the lineup and declares Team 1, led by Irina Olisadas, with Dan and Laberglico rounding it out. And everyone notes how wildly rare it is for Linkian and the protagonist to be split into different teams. It barrels straight into Team 2, and she names Lynch and Marshall as the leaders. Then Luke Muriel and the rest light up as Lynch eagerly takes the role, and it's like the whole series is shouting, "All right, here comes the next team." Right as he's about to carry on, Libera Glico shoots her hand up and speaks to the teacher. Because she's Luke's attendant, she begs to be put on his team. Glorin shuts her down on the spot, saying they have to balance the grades, then tells her to bear with it. So Luke gets her to focus on her own team, and Libera drops her head, crushed. Still reluctant, she nods when she sees his disappointment. Then Luke flashes a gentle smile, turns to her, and tells her to stay safe and not get hurt. Even after his reassurance, Libera snaps her glasses into place, and her face still screams worry. She's convinced Luke will be okay, but she won't let him forget one thing: stay sharp and be careful. Once the teams were set, Glorin snapped into action. He told everyone to split up, find their groups, and kick off the meetings, and the students immediately surged into motion, rushing toward different rooms to link up. In the room, Lin Shen Marshall stands tall with her hands on her hips and introduces herself as the team leader, while Muriel inches in beside her and quietly admits she's a scholarship student who loves studying, just not fighting, and she can't stop worrying if Lin Shen is really that scary. Right after that, Ruby, the cat-like beast man, pops in with a cheerful grin and introduces herself, claiming she's an active adventurer, so the team can count on her in any dungeon, and then Luke goes, "I'm Luke Hugolo Disgustos." Muriel jumps in and offers to grab whatever the team needs. Bread, juice, anything. Then, right as she says it, Luke can't shake the thought that she might be trying to play the role of an errand girl. He's totally flustered by Ruby standing so close, fighting the urge to touch her cat-like ears. Then he hesitates, and she notices right away, beams, asks him to call her Luke Sama, and even tells him he can pat her head if he wants, and he just quietly agrees. When Ruby's squad catches sight of it, Libera's face lights up with shock, while Ruby winks and grins at her new teammates. "Relax, do whatever you want." Her laid-back comment instantly sparks a violent retort from Linkian. He rips into her, roaring, "What are you doing, Ruby?" She snaps back that they're supposed to be talking about the team's dynamics, then orders her to shut up and listen. Her fury flips on a dime. Her eyes lock onto Luke like he's the villain behind the whole disruption, and he can only think, great, how troublesome did things just get? Feeling the tension rising, Muriel speaks up in a calm voice and pushes for a break. So the whole team drops down, and Luke finally lets out a little breath, looking like he's easing up. Muriel tries to make peace, but everything flips when she offers her lap as a pillow. Ruby absolutely jumps on it and seconds that idea with zero hesitation. This fresh development slams straight into Lynchen and sends fresh horror crawling over her. She jerks back, stares at the others like, "What are you even talking about?" Then spits out accusations of impurity. Luke's stuck right in the crossfire, and the moment he thinks it, he winces. A lap pillow is way too intimate, especially since they've only just met. She keeps ripping into them, stressing this is a strategy meeting and sleep is absolutely off limits. And as she steams, Luke can't help but notice just how picky she is. Then Muriel, totally unbothered, declares it's time to run their final checks. With the conversation finally back on track, Lynch declares he'll take a night's roll on the front lines. Then Ruby cuts in, saying she'll be right there too, bragging about her dagger skills, her lightning-fast dodges, and her tribute magic. With the others setting the pace, Muriel snaps into place as the rearguard, cracks that her healing magic won't miss a beat, and flexes her archery skills. Then she lays out the team's game plan from the start. She gasps in total shock when Luke, looking utterly wiped out, flat out says he just wants to sleep. With fatigue weighing him down, Lynch coolly steps in and offers to carry him, since they're both stuck in the rearguard, while Myra watches, stunned. Then Lynch's calm snaps into pure rage when she turns on Ruby, screaming that Ruby's coddling is the whole reason he's being swept away, and Ruby just playfully meows right back, pushing Lynch over the edge. Lynch's argument fizzles out as exasperation sharpens his voice. "So, are we all cool with taking on the dungeon this weekend?" Ruby beams and says yes. Luke backs her up, and Muriel shrugs, declaring she's got zero objections. Just like that, Lynch slams the brakes on the discussion and calls the meeting for the day. As the meeting wraps up, he stares while Muriel and Ruby stroll away side by side, and it hits him as weirdly fast, like they're showing favoritism just to catch his attention because he's noble. He can't shake the doubt, and he figures it won't be easy to truly get along with them until they deal with their own personal drama first. A wild new idea hits him. What if they don't see him as a noble trying to win their favor at all, but as an idol with them hanging on his every move like worshipping fans? And once he imagines that, he realizes it's way better than being hated. From across the hall, Libera Glicko leans in beside her and shouts Luke's name, while Dan clocks that Team 1 looks finished with their meeting and immediately asks Libera if she managed to click with her teammates. She closes in on Luke, grabs his hand, and demands to know what that conversation was about. Luke flashes her a calm, reassuring smile, says it's nothing, and tells her it's time to go. As he watches them vanish, Dan can't shake one burning question. Does Luke still hate him, and the rest of them too? His eyes stay locked on Luke as he vanishes into the distance, and his face turns into a solemn storm of thoughts. He can't believe it. After years of thinking the protagonist would always hate him, this time the truth hits hard, and the hostility he braced for is just gone. Luke Disgustos stood there by himself, and this weird, uneasy feeling washed over him like a cold wave. That rush stayed with him all the way into the weekend as he drove his team down the path toward their goal, the Rank 2 Forest Dungeon. As they headed inside, Libero laid out the dungeon's secrets, tucked up in the mountains behind the school, and even though it was huge, it only ranked a measly 2 out of 10. She shrugged and said the reason was simple. Students kept hunting the monsters, so their numbers never had time to grow. Ruby jumped in and spelled it out. A dungeon's core is basically a giant ball of mana, and people dive in for valuables like magic stones that fuel magical tools. So to keep the dungeon's rank from spiraling, adventurers are sent in to rein in the monster population. Later, while Luke caught his breath, Lynchen and Muriel hovered over him, fretting, "You tired?" Muriel shoved a drink into his hands, but Luke waved them off. He was fine. Libera just watched in silence, checking, "Anything else you need?" Muriel's calm vibe hit her like a switch. Suddenly she got exactly why she liked him so much. Right then, Luke pointed to a target and told her to fire, and without hesitation, she launched the arrow. A few days back, that conversation came roaring back. Karen was pouring his tea, telling him she'd heard the whole story straight from Muriel, how Luke had cured her little brother's illness, and how Muriel's gratitude for him ran deep. You suddenly remembered the orphanage boy? Then Muriel flashed in your head, her cheeks blazing with real, heartfelt gratitude. It grilled Karen on why Muriel would trust her, and Karen snapped back that since they were on the same side now, Muriel was desperate to repay his kindness. So much so that she even went as far as getting permission from Luke's own fiancé. That memory flipped Muriel's actions into a whole new light. She felt like she'd finally smashed her debt, and thanks to Karen stepping in, she could finally breathe. Karen, though, just watched Muriel's overwhelming gratitude and never meant to put her in anyone's obligation. Ruby bursts back from her task, grinning as she clutches a magic Stonoloft, and tells a resting Luke that with the monsters standing still, her job is basically a cakewalk. Effortless progress might sound great, but it drives Lynching into a rage. She screams that they aren't even fighting and exposes Luke's trick. He used his magic to knock every monster nearby into deep sleep. Her dissatisfaction is total. She grumbles at everything, even whining that she can barely be bothered to move, and then the plan clicks into place. Myra will fire her bow to wipe out the sleeping monsters, while Ruby grabs the magic stones and hunts down anything that's still standing. Even as she wipes out a dozing creature like it's nothing, she screams, "This isn't training," and demands to know why even the monsters are all stuck asleep. Seeing her frustration spill over, Muriel strides in and calmly orders Lynchun to back off, promising she'll lay it all out, just for Luke's sake. She kicks things off by saying the exact same magic Luke uses to knock the monster out is what sharpens his own power too, because even while he's asleep, he can still use his abilities. She keeps talking, saying that because of Luke's backing, even someone like her, no fighter in direct combat, can step into a deadly dungeon, train her archery, and level up in safety. She flashes a warm, gentle smile and leans in, asking Linkian straight up if he finally gets what kind of person Luke really is, and what he's been doing for them this whole time. Her heartfelt words land in the moment, and then Luke, just waking up, breaks the silence by patting her on the head and telling her she did great. Muriel's overwhelmed, tears spill out from happiness, and Luke is left totally stunned. Right when the Tinder moment heats up, Ruby bursts in, claiming it's totally unfair, and shoots straight past the awkwardness to demand head pats for herself too. Lynch's frustration finally explodes. She snaps that a dungeon is supposed to be a deadly trial where a crew forges bonds through real hardship, not whatever safe, easy routine they're doing now, and she can't help but think the whole setup is downright weird. Luke's slammed with her outburst, and he just shoots back his go-to question, what's so bad about clearing a dungeon safely and without a sweat? Lynch doesn't flinch, saying it may not be bad at all, but the worry still clings to her. He keeps going, insisting that their efficiency pays off for everyone, especially the monsters getting hunted and the people who desperately need the dungeon's resources. And Muriel and Ruby just sit there, quiet as he talks. His eyes sharpen like a blade as he fires off a straight question, his fist tight at his side, demanding Lynch to his face if she's really ready to throw her comrades into danger. That sharp question hits like a punch, and Lynchon's flustered. She blurts out that she wants nothing to do with it. And the second Luke sees her reaction, he stays cool and asks if she finally understands who was the one being inappropriate. Once the dust finally settled, he lifted a hand and called it for the day, sending Lynch reeling, completely speechless and clearly shaken. She shoots a glance at the sleeping monster nearby, weighing everything in her head. Because if their leader won't push, they should just call it off, since this is only a practice run. With her head bowed, Linkian turns to offer an apology. But before she can slip away, Luke, lounging in comfort, tells her to wait. He snaps his eyes open, flips his earlier choice on the spot, and declares they should keep going, because they've still got time, while Lin Shen stares at him, stunned by that sudden change of heart. With the tension finally cracked, the whole team snaps back into rhythm. Muriel knocks her bow, Ruby fuels her magic, and Lin Shen rockets forward with her sword held high, ready to cleave the next beast that's still half asleep. Luke sprawled comfortably on a big, plush cushion, while tiny, fish-like creatures circled around him like they were right at home. Just as he finally gets a breath of peace standing there with his team, a thick, bearded man barges in and says he's sending the magic stones to the school, meaning they can finally go home. While the man is talking, Luke snaps his eyes toward Lynch. She lets out a crushing sigh, her face going ice cold, then turns straight to him and demands a ranking match, right away, and makes sure he hasn't already forgotten what happened with Dan. He calmly dodges the challenge and tells Ruby to be the one who fights. Right then. Lynchun snaps back, saying it makes no sense, but she stands her ground. If Ruby wins, then it's Lynchun who has to order her to battle without using her magic. His eyes squeeze shut with pure intensity as he spits out, "I hate uncivilized people." Then he barrels straight into her motives. Does she really want to start a fight and gamble with their team's lives? She freezes from his brutal words, and Ruby barrels in like she owns the moment, telling Lynchun to back off and leave it to her. Luke steps up and makes it clear. Whether she squares up against him or Ruby won't change a thing because he's not fighting at all. Then Merrill jumps in, fully backing Luke's logic. He whips around to Ruby to double-check. You good with this? Ruby nods right away with a cheerful Naya, while the defeated Lynch lowers her head and murmurs, all right. Ruby closes in on Linkian and says she has no real reason to fight, but she sees this as a huge compromise. Because Linkian is just too awkward to speak her thoughts any other way, so she only knows how to throw punches. She snaps into a perfect pose and, as Luke Stanton, formally dares Linchon to a ranking match. So Linchon squares up and accepts without hesitation, while Luke just watches from nearby, praying this duel will finally satisfy her.